Well, it's 9 o'clock. We'll call the meeting of the Leavenworth Board of County Commissioners to order. They pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Hey, at this time, there's two of us here today. Entertain a motion to elect a temporary chair. If one of you wants to make that motion.
I'll make a motion to elect Mike Steven as temporary chair.
Second. Commissioner Cos, second.
There's a motion, a second. All those voting. Commissioner Cos.
Aye.
Commissioner Culberson.
Aye.
Commissioner Shimke.
Aye.
And I abstain. Okay. Good morning. We'll observe a moment of silence now. Please remember all our friends, family, people that have been affected by all the things that are going on in our country and the illnesses. Good morning. We will, at this time, have an update from the County Health Officer, Mr. Jamie Miller.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning, Mr. Miller.
I'm just going to begin by providing a county overview, and this is based off of the last update on Monday. We were at 3,107 cases. Total for the county, 1,961 are community cases, considered community cases. 44 are attributed to the St. Mary's University, 84 at the Grossman Center, 892 at LCF, 124 USP, and 2 at Core Civic. Of those cases, 245 are being monitored as community cases, and 6 are St. Mary's cases, for a total of 251 active cases that are being monitored by the health department. We have had 6 currently in the hospital, and we have had 22 deaths. The current county positivity rate is at 16.03%, and the community rate, case rate is at 497.81 per 100,000. That equates to 29.07 per day. That's up significantly over the last 2 weeks. One of the things that I want to bring up is testing. The week of October 18th, we performed 1,147 tests in the county that have been submitted in through the state system to the health department, with 66 positives. That's a 5.75%. October 25th, 1,064 tests were performed with 102 positives, 9.59%. November 1st, 1,231 with 175 positive, 14.22%. And November 7th is 1,301 with 231 positive at a 17.76% last week. And that's what puts us in, when we're doing the 2-week positivity rate, we're at that 16.03. Moving forward, we're still continuing to take on a significant amount of cases into the health department, each update daily. And that's in concert with the entire Kansas City Metro, the state, and basically, if you're looking nationwide, we're seeing an influx of community spread. That is the biggest issue that we have right at the moment. Community spread means it's unknown exactly where everyone is catching it from. It's everywhere. Health officials, including myself, over the last several, have been monitoring. Kansas City health officials have put out last week significant information calling to action residents to help fight the spread. The limited strategies that still remain are the same strategies that I have given to the public, given to the board as recommendations. Obviously, social distancing and avoid unnecessary personal interactions, proper hygiene, wearing a mask covering the nose and mouth when in public around others, stay at home if you're sick, and avoid large gatherings of people. Unfortunately, a lot of our caseload here in the Leavenworth County that we've seen through contact tracing and discussing with these individuals that are positive, a lot of it is activities. It's parties, holiday events, neighborhood gatherings, social interactions, weddings, birthday parties, things of that nature have really significantly driven a lot of cases. Sporting activities also has been some of the cases that we have seen that have been linked together. We have seen success with the strategies that I mentioned before. That's schools. They've demonstrated a very good adherence to those policies, and when that happens, we've had rare instances of classroom transmission. Where we've seen it is when individuals have become positive outside and they show back up into school, and then they're exposing individuals at the school. What we have seen is rare occasions of when someone is in school, the spread actually starts from school to others in that same classroom or those contacts. Kansas City Hospital Chief Medical Officer has also put out a significant press release last week. Our Kansas City hospitals, local hospitals, are saturated right at the moment for capabilities. One of their words, basically, as they put out in their press release, is hospital infectious control is at an all-time high, and hospitals are protecting staff and patients from COVID-19 spread in their facilities. However, the growing level of community spread is also impacting bed capacity by reducing staff availability due to the staff being exposed out in the community. Hospitals are growing increasingly concerned about having to delay procedures, treatments, and surgeries for patients who truly need them. Delayed or deferred care can create bad outcomes for patients and their families and the community. I think it's very prudent for me to also remind the board that we did lose one of our community hospitals, which did have some bed capacity. So we are sharing those bed capacities when we do put out hospitalizations, especially those that need ICU and ventilator support, are sharing that in the Kansas City Metro. Just real quick, to give a snapshot in a realism, October 30th, we were at 89 active cases. November 16th update was at 251. That's 162 case increase just in the 2-week capacity that the health department is monitoring. On October 30th, we were at 14 deaths in this community. And on November 16th, we were at 22. That's an increase of 8. We were at 78 hospitalizations on the 30th. And on November 16th, we were at 84, which is an increase of 8. It's important, I think, for myself to revisit with the commission that we need to do anything and everything we can to push these strategies out in our community to help slow the spread. The health department is, lack of a better term, taxed. We are overwhelmed with that amount of cases being added in and trying to contact trace, trying to quarantine, trying to isolate, making the phone calls, making the follow-ups, and doing everything that we have to do at the health department. We cannot continue down this path. As this keeps growing, I fear for what it's going to look like in the next several weeks, obviously with additional holidays coming into play and people in gatherings. I think that's where a lot of us are in the public health aspect, in the healthcare side of things, very concerned. That's the overall report. I open it up for any questions or concerns that the board may have.
Are there, I think since we have people on the phone, I'm just going to call on you guys individually on the phone for your questions. So call on Commissioner Cause.
I have no questions, but following questions, I would like to have a motion entertained.
Okay. Commissioner Culberson?
I don't have any questions.
Jamie, do we have the numbers to compare to adjacent counties that have had much more rigorous mandates and controls in place to see how we compare?
I pulled as of Monday as well. Wyandotte County was at 18.2%, 167 deaths, 86 hospitalizations, and 5,784 per 100,000. Johnson County is at 16.5%, 253 deaths, and I didn't quite get, based off of Johnson County, where they're at on their 100% or per 100,000 mark. off their website.
So those are a couple counties that have had mandates in place, much more restrictions on businesses, yet have a higher percentage. What rationale do we apply to that?
Again, gatherings, and enforcement's the big one. Obviously, you can have all the mandates you want. Enforcement is very difficult. But what we have also found is what I look at is where those strategies are in place and where they're working is schools. And we're not having, when we have stringent guidelines in mass usage, and when we have stringent guidelines in, and I believe you all received a letter from all the superintendents supporting that as well, when it is being enforced, it is working. And the schools are a model for that in regards to when masks are in place, when social distancing is in place, when a lot of safety protocols are in place, it's working, and we're not seeing the transmission levels that we are seeing in communities. I don't have all of the answers in regards to, but I can tell you that a lot of, lack of a better terms, COVID fatigue and people just not adhering to, if you go down into Johnson County, there's a lot of people running around, even with a mask, they're not wearing their masks appropriately, and they're not wearing them. They're having large gatherings, they're doing things that, again, are going to go, the numbers are going to happen. But what I'm looking at is the science in our county and what I can look at to evaluate, and that's schools where it is in place and it is being monitored and it is being put into place. I'm not seeing cross-contamination from when both are in masks within less than 6 feet, 3 feet for 8 hours a day of a positive. Those individuals are not being infected.
On the contact tracing, so you talk about fatigue, and I can't thank you and your team enough, and I know it's been several months of this. Early on, we asked, at what point, again, when you talk about community spread, or it's happening in homes and it's happening at parties, is the return on your investment in time and energy not there from a tracing perspective? Because I always struggle with, we test 1,000 people. These are 1,000 people that have had some type of potential contact or exposure, but not, again, just unaffiliated testing to figure out just how widespread it is when we still have so many people that didn't know they had it.
We've gone to triage contact tracing to where we will look at not necessarily we can't keep up with contact tracing for everyone that calls in. That's not happening anymore with widespread. What we do ask is household contacts, and we also then look at individuals that are at high risk environments. So if they've been to nursing homes, if they work in nursing homes, if they work at high risk employers, daycares, things of that nature, where there may be a large spread. And then we also have the assistance from all the schools on the contact tracing within the schools. We have school nurses that we have the availability that we're using those resources as well to assist in with. But as of the contact tracing with 200, we're focusing in on those active cases is what we have to look at, and isolating those cases in those contacts within the home to make sure that those individuals are not leaving because they're being exposed for the entire time that individual is positive.
Could you explain the gating requirement for the schools and when it goes into the red? It seems like it would be virtually impossible. From the way I read it, it would be really difficult to have in-person school when you're in the red. Can you kind of go through what the criteria is and where you move from
Sure.
one?
The gating criteria was created clear back before school ever started, and that was the public health recommendation. That was also KDHE's recommendations, Children's Mercy's recommendation, as well as Kansas Department of Education's recommendations for those gating criteria. Each mode of education, it's based on are we increasing in numbers? What's the positive percentage rate? And there's levels for that, and then there's total cases per 100,000. That is the criteria that was adopted. All of the different school districts adopted some level based off of that gating criteria of what they felt comfortable for their school district was. when we moved into all red, basically this past week, as well as moving 2 of the 3 were in the red the week before.
And what level, when do we cross to the red? What's the number?
We crossed into red at 15%.
15%.
And then anything above 200 cases per 100,000, and we're at 497. So we're almost 2.5 times almost where we should be in that.
That's not active.
I'm sorry?
That's not active. That's just total, right?
What that is total for that 2-week period. How many cases were added in on those days throughout that 2-week period?
Right, because then they do begin to drop off.
They do drop off.
Right.
Once they reach their recovery stage, which is a minimum of 10 days, it has to be 7 days.
10 days
3
symptom
days,
free, right?
And then they're no longer spreading the virus in your community is what we're looking for.
But it used to be you have to test negative, but then we determined that you can test positive for several months, right?
Correct. It can be up to 90 days for an individual can continue to test positive. So negativity is no longer right. That was early on. We thought that we were going to have to do negative testing. It went to symptomology release on recovery early on, and we've followed that strategy along with what KDHE's recommendations have been.
And if you have a classroom and you have a student that becomes positive or ill, we have for a while there was different requirements on that. But you did in some school districts they changed it to where if you had the students had masks and had maintained social distance.
Yeah, it was called the Mask Incentive Program, basically.
Right.
From
Explain
Public
that
Health.
to us.
It was it is still not from KDHE's recommendation. It's not CDC's recommendation for contact tracing. There are several public health entities that have come forward and said for a trade-off to those schools to wear masks and put masks as a mandate in those schools. It was more of a bargaining tool that says, look, okay, we'll do an exclusion program. If both were in masks, we will if both individuals are in masks, we will not exclude them, even if one of them is positive less than that 6 feet mark. We did make a change after we had some data within our school district to see on how many that we did exclude would transfer out. And in October 16th, we made that change into Leavenworth County out to all of our school districts. So we follow that modality of if both are in mass, and we have been doing that since, and we've also had success with that as well, that even those individuals that are less than 6 feet, both in mass, one's positive, and they're not being excluded, we've had very limited transmission amongst those.
So we're getting a lot of calls from parents that are very concerned, about the schools closing. Mm-hmm. And one of the factors is their, discussion on the grading, that criteria. That's what we've gotten a lot of calls about that.
Yeah, it's not the thing that we need to remember in schools, and you also received the letter from the superintendent. It's not just about the transmission rate that's happening in there. The effects that are happening from the community and the amount of cases that are coming back into the schools and the people that are having to be excluded because at lunchtime they are taking their masks off, but you also have not enough teachers that is starting to happen within these schools, and that was one of the topics at the meeting with the superintendent, is we have schools that are having to shut down because they don't have enough staff to continue classes and enough substitutes and things, and that's the whole reason also behind the gating criteria. It's not just about kids, it's the community spread and how many cases are in our community and what that effect is, and we have to make a break here. The biggest issue we have is we're having so many cases that keep coming up, we have to do something different. It's the same thing that happened with St. Mary's. We were having so many cases. We went up, we tested, we shut down for 2 weeks, we eliminated cases. It started back up. What ends up happening? More cases start popping up. St. Mary's has now gone to they're looking at, they're done, they're going to stop. They're sending people home. They're not going to do some of their sporting because the amount of cases that keeps happening it's not safe. There was a death associated to a St. Mary's case. And that was not a young person. Not an old elderly person. That was a young, vibrant individual that had a negative outcome to COVID-19, had no other significant past medical history.
So when we began count, like the total number of deaths was 22. What was the initial date for the beginning of that? The statistics, was that in March or?
That's the entire time.
Did you start? Was it March 1st? I just wanted the original date.
March, sometime in March. Yes.
Sometime in March. So okay.
Jamie, real quick, you mentioned the teachers and just staff, right, being able to support the system that we have. But we're saying that the positives aren't coming from that environment. They're coming from the residential or in-home environment, most likely. So the challenge with most of this, or even looking at those other communities that again, have more rigid requirements, their numbers are similar, and the issues are happening in environments that don't have anything to do with schools or businesses or government or anything else, it seems like, is what's being said.
Well, no, the exposure is coming from the community, which is also, we have a lot of exposure from businesses and businesses that don't have, the county doesn't have a mask mandate, for one, so that you can go around to several different businesses that are not requiring masks in restaurants and bars and different establishments, gas stations and such around town, and you can witness it, you can see it. And again, without having a whole lot of contact tracing and availability, that's exposure. Anytime anybody's without a mask, you have the potential to exposure. And I hear it all the time that, well, I'm not sick. The whole problem is you can be a carrier and not know you're sick and have it's called asymptomology. And the struggle with mask mandates, whether you're for them, against them, or anything else, the science is there. And again, doctors have used masks in surgery for decades. There's a reason for that. It does keep, the droplets from expelling out into the air and somebody else catching that. The science is there, and we're witnessing it in the schools. We know in there, because we are doing the contact tracing, we know of a positive, and we know the individuals that are in that close proximity, and they're not being exposed when they're both in masks. What we also have had is a few that have happened in schools, and the masks have not been there, and we have had that transmission occur. So we do have data to support what a mask can do and what a mask won't do. I'm not saying that it's perfect. I'm not saying that it's 100%. But it is the easiest strategy and the simplest strategy that we do have that's available to us that is of no cost. It's one of those that I don't wear my mask today sitting here to protect me. My mask is protecting everyone in this room. If I am an asymptomatic carrier and I am expelling that into this air, I am going to reduce that exposure to anyone in this room. It's not about protecting myself. It's about me trying to protect my fellow people in this community. That's what it's about.
So I had a question on the 11/16/2020 on the KDHE website. It's had a little different number than you had. Are those numbers behind on the KDHE, or are they ahead of you? Because it had 14% on. And
you got to remember, on my percentage, I pull out inmates. So when I'm pulling out inmates and where if you're looking at you're looking at, did you go to the gating criteria? Is that what you went on, the school gating criteria on the KDHE website and looked at the?
Yeah, it was it was just the statistics on hospitalizations and testing.
Okay.
And I've compared.
When you look at that, if you're looking at the current week, that is going to be behind because not all of the cases have been entered into. So it's only going to have whatever's been entered in for the week. That's why I've said for months, we are always about a 2-week lag on catching back up. Every time I get when I do my update today, say there's 90 or 100 that are added into it. It's not 100 cases that are today. It's 100 cases that could be added all the way back for the last 2 to 3 weeks that are being backlogged from private labs, doctor's offices, VA, wherever they may come in from, or someone may be tested, and it finally gets routed back to the health department because they live here.
Yeah, well, I guess the point that I was kind of following up with what the point that Commissioner Shimke made was, for instance, our positive rate is 14%, we're a non-mask mandate county. And we're looking at Johnson County 16.5, very much a mask mandate county. Wyandotte County was 19%, which is a mask mandate county, and very much closing businesses and very restrictive. Shawnee County, 13%. They're the same as us virtually. So it looks like that if you would look at the positivity rate, that there's very little difference.
Well, and if you're only focusing on a positivity rate, that's probably not the greatest thing to be looking at.
Do we look at hospitalization rate, or what would you look at?
No, you need to look at all of it. And one of the biggest things is we have to look at how many cases are coming out of that positivity rate as well. We've gone up 2.5 times almost in the last 2 weeks in the number of cases. That means your exposure is going to be that much higher in Leavenworth County than it was 2 weeks ago. A positivity rate's only at best on what you're testing, how much you can test. We're testing as much as we can, which is only 1,300 tests in a week time frame. So that's doing a snapshot of only 1,300 people being tested out of how many people that are in our community. What I'm also have to look at is how many additional cases have dropped into Leavenworth County. That's your exposure rate of running around of known positives. How many people are running around out there that are asymptomatic and or refuse to go and get tested to even know, they may have symptoms, they're staying home, but they're not producing a test, so we're not following tracking or anything else. But are they being isolated, or are they out in our community still running around thinking it's allergies?
But that would be true in all the counties in the metro.
Absolutely.
So all I'm saying is the comparison, because we're being asked to mandate masks, and the comparison of this snapshot here doesn't indicate that the positivity rates are different. We're very much in the same vicinity with the mandate.
But it is, if you look at the number of tests over the last 4 weeks, has really not increased. We were at about 1,200 tests being 2 weeks ago, and we did 1,300, but our positivity rate went from 6% to basically 17%. That's a huge increase.
It's going up all over the region, all over the country.
Sure.
But the question and all I'm saying, and when we get into this discussion, I think you don't want to be having a false sense of security based on one part of it, because it's about multiple things. It's about washing hands. It's about social distancing. It's about not going to family gatherings where you have people that can be exposed. It's about you taking personal responsibility to wear your mask. And it's there's not one panacea, and if you could see our emails, you would be shocked.
I will share mine as well.
I know Jamie gets a lot. Jamie, are we seeing this is more, I guess, a medical question. Are we seeing the severity at all changing as we go month to month, or as we look how things have progressed since March? When we talk about, again, we've got way more cases. I'm always still going to struggle as a numbers statistics person to say when we test 1,200 people, is that truly giving us a great sample? These are all people that we know have had exposure. It's not just a random 1,000 people that would tell you whether you're 6% in the community or 25% in the community, right? It's a skewed number no matter how you look at it. And it's an imperfect science that you all are being asked to solve. I realize that. But severity-wise, with cases increasing all over, across the states, country, severity-wise, what are the professionals saying?
A majority of our cases, obviously, with recover fairly quickly with mild symptoms. We then have some of the moderate. We have some that, again, the long-term effects are some of what we're starting to see of people calling back saying, well, I know I recovered a month ago, but I'm still having some side effects from. Those are the things that are still being studied in science and through the medical side of what are going to be these long-term, long hauler is kind of the term that's been out. So we're looking at, some of that, but quite frankly, right at the moment, we're trying to unbury from the caseload that keeps getting dumped onto us, and that's the focus right at the moment, as well as testing. because the only strategies that we have are to put these type of things in play, try to get the word out to individuals that this is serious, this is what we're dealing with, and still be testing enough so individuals know when they're positive to stay away from other individuals, even if they're asymptomatic, because they were in contact. And that's the strategies that we're trying to put into play here. We're trying to push that out. It is of concern that we did increase by 8 deaths in a 2-week period. Obviously, as our numbers are going up, we're seeing an increase in death. And my concern is, how is that going to continue to increase? Yes, all of ours community deaths have been 65 and older. However, we did have the individual, it was not ours, they lived over on the Missouri side, but they were affiliated with St. Mary, and they were younger. They were in their 20s. So it does affect across all age groups.
No, that's very helpful.
This is Commissioner Cos.
Commissioner Cos, you're recognized.
Yeah, the fact remains that Leavenworth County has absolutely not had anything mandatory. Everything has been voluntary. So we have no idea how great we could be doing compared to Johnson and Wyandotte County if we had ordered use of masks.
So my question was going to be, thank you, Commissioner Cos. Very early on it was slow. It was never stop. It's always been slow. And so we've been worried about the hospitals. And so, again, I go back to bed counts and understanding where Kansas and Missouri rank, which is very high per capita compared to what you might find in New York or Chicago, where you have far greater density and far fewer resources. As far as I know, a hospital can't make any money if it doesn't have a pretty high occupancy to begin with. Meaning if you have a hospital with tons of capacity, it's not making any money, and lots of times they close. So when you are running a hospital like a CEO would, they want to have a 95, 98, 100% occupancy when there's not a pandemic. So balancing the elective surgeries and all the things that actually make them money, or canceling all those like they had done before. I think that was one of the big issues early on. We shut everything down. We stopped all electives. Hospitals laid people off. Hospitals didn't see the surge. Now, correlations one way or the other, but I do think that that's one of the things that concerns most people in the community. So the ones that are in, and again, we hear both sides, and you do too, right? The ones that are vastly in support of, I think, are of the concern of the hospital aspect, less about the concern of if they get it personally. It's more about their parent or grandparent, of which most of us haven't seen people that fall into that category since March.
Well, and hospital surge, too, Commissioner, also rolls to when we are at capacity, all of the other medical conditions that are emergent as well, if you don't, are not going to be available. And that's what the chief medical officers were trying to put out, is as we're surging now with COVID cases on top of, when you do have that heart attack, there may not be an ICU bed for you to go with your heart attack, because now it is with, so this is what we prepared for back in March when things, it was we have to protect, we cannot surge a hospital. It didn't happen. We're way worse now with our numbers and our hospital capacities right at the moment than obviously we were back in March. And that's why these hospital chief medical officers are coming out and saying we have a problem and we need to do something. Communities need to do something. Residents need to, because what's going to happen is when you do have, it may not be COVID, but when you have that heart attack or you have that stroke or you have some other medical condition, there may also not be a bed available in the Kansas City metro that you can go to, because it is now taxed. And it may not be taxed because there's someone laying in that bed. There's no one to care for them.
Sure.
And that's the other issue. Doctors, nurses, and other health, everyone in that hospital is also being taxed by the community. And when they're affected, the hospitals are affected as well by the number of staff they even take care of. EMSs, fire, everyone is affected by caseload. And when people become affected by this, there's negative outcome. And that's what the message was out from those, that they're at a real fork in the road of we have to do something to get through this and slow this down, or we're going to be in a drastic position very soon. And quite frankly, it's not getting any better.
Are there certain hospitals in the metro area that are designated to receive COVID Patients?
All hospitals have COVID patients in their hospitals right now. They have to. We have so many cases. They're all reporting.
And do you know in the metro area what the numbers are?
Yeah, I have the website. I can share that with you. You can go on and it's updated daily. It's on the Kansas Prepared.
Okay. I'll go around the horn again. Commissioner Culberson, do you have anything to add or any questions?
No, I was just looking at the numbers. And like Commissioner Cos was talking about, we don't have any idea how good we would have been doing if we would have passed the mask order. The flip side of that is our numbers are slightly better than all the adjacent counties who do have the mask order. So that's what I keep looking at.
Mr. Cos?
I have no further comments, but I am willing to make a motion at any point.
Okay. Any additional questions, Commissioner Shimke?
No. Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. Let's see. I guess Commissioner Cos, what you want to? I guess this would be the time to go ahead and. When should we work in this public comment? You want to do that after this, after the administrative business?
No, I would say probably do it after, since Jamie is done, whatever motion Commissioner Cos was going to make, and then do the public comment, because we do have people who are waiting to call for calls.
Okay. Commissioner Cos, you're recognized.
Thank you. Commissioner Cos moves that the Board of County Commissioners rescind Board Order number 2020-3 in order to allow Executive Order number 52 become effective in Leavenworth County and those areas subject to the jurisdiction of the Executive Order.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Hearing none, the motion fails. I would like to make a comment on this. We have received so many emails and letters and phone calls that if we were going to take this action or move to this, I think we should have, very much like we did with the sand plant, move ahead and next week have a public hearing and hear from both sides. And I didn't know about this resolution until just yesterday. So if that was the desire of the board, I think we ought to let all sides be heard on this and then take an official vote at a future meeting. We certainly don't have time on today's agenda. Comments from the other commissioners?
This is Commissioner Cos. I appreciate your comment, Commissioner Stephen. However, we are in an extraordinary situation that we're dealing with, given the situation that has occurred over the past week. And I personally don't feel that we have heard from and been discussing and listening to the comments for and against the mask order since July. And I don't see that that's going to change anybody's mind, that that's going to move anybody in any other direction. And I respect the decision of the Board of County Commissioners not to rescind the order.
Okay. Thank you very much for doing that. I would say we do, there is a no-win situation when it comes to the issue of mandates, but we all are in agreement that you need to use your masks this holiday season. If you have loved ones and people with conditions, you should consider not having large gatherings. Wash your hands, observe health and safety regulations. We all are in agreement on that, and that certainly is. And if I know I've had a few emails saying that Leavenworth County doesn't do anything. If you look on our website, all these recommendations are on the website, recommending using the mask. If you cannot maintain your social distancing, the health officer here has been very proactive. Our county has our numbers are right in the ballpark with the rest of the metro area, and we have been recommendation. And at some point, it's personal responsibility, folks. That's my opinion. So any other comments on that before we move on?
This is Commissioner Cos. I want to interject that, yes, our health officer has been proactive, and both he and our medical director did request that we order the use of masks.
Okay. Commissioner Culbertson, any further comments, and we'll move on?
No, I have none.
Okay, Chad?
No, just thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Now we'll the public hearing, or the public comment.
You have a list of people?
I do not. Becky?
Mr. Herring.
Morning, Commissioner.
Morning.
Joe Herring, Herring Surveying, 315 North 5th Street. Appreciate your time. I know we got a lot of stuff on the agenda today and probably bigger issues. Said the Commissioner is in concerning 2020-46 professional development fee, and asking to table that issue in order for developers to get more information and more input into this policy, or dismiss it if that's what you wish to do as a board. I've been active in this community for quite some time, for 11 years plus. We've had a planner up here that has been anti-development. We had a board up here that really didn't give anybody direction. It had a comp plan that was relatively worthless. We now have a board that is pro-development, wanting to be open for business, wanting rooftops. We have a planner and a planning department that is working with citizens to get what we want. We got staff in the basement below that are working as well to get this done. There's probably overly competent surveyor down there that has no issues when surveys come through. And we're about to stop it or put a control on it by assessing fees to developers to pay outside. In all the discussions I've had, and I won't get into too many details of it, I'm just asking you for you to table it today. It's all really comes down to one issue, Little Nape Sand Pit. That's been the biggest cost to our county taxpayers.
$40,000.
Never had that figure. It wasn't in the analysis. Appreciate that.
Between 30 and 40.
And it's a one-off policy, it seems like. I don't see the other problems. Development is paying for itself, and building permits alone have paid for all the review fees out of one project. I believe we need more data. We need time to discuss it and come to an agreement between developers and the county through that email, and hopefully at that time we can have those questions answered that I did send. And I'm sure others have sent. I've read a couple other emails that were forwarded to me that they sent some concerns that we're going to hurt business, hurt development, and that appears not to be the goal of this board. We want to get businesses here, and we want to have rooftops to control our taxes. I appreciate your time on that, and as a citizen, I am against any building codes, always have been, probably always will be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Coldwell Banker Riley and Son. This is Haley. How may I help you?
Extension 245, please.
Just a moment. Hello, this is Diana.
Diana, this is Becky with the County Commissioner's Office. We are ready for your public comment. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Hello, my name is Diana Morrissey. I live at 2201 Cottonwood Street in the Branches subdivision, which is also known as Lot 1 and Track C. My first concern is someone using the barbed wire gate and cutting across my yard. I do not want any dirt, debris, people, equipment on my property. I do have sprinklers, so if somebody would drive a large truck through my property, it would damage things. Also, just possible if somebody would reconsider or think of the fact that the land, I believe, is 100 acres. If there is any way that instead of digging right behind, 4 or 5 people's property, they could use all that other land that's there. And then my other last concern is having the large equipment moving in and out. It's very hard to pull out onto Eisenhower from Birch Street, and I believe with all the equipment, it might be difficult. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Was that all the public comment? Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay, Mark?
So that's the end of public comment. The other item we had under administrative business, the County Road 1 rezoning. The commission had asked for some additional information. This has come up a couple of times. It was actually on an agenda over a year ago. Was tabled at that time to while we were completing the comp plan. Staff is just looking for some direction on how the board would like to proceed on the County Road 1 rezoning.
If we do not move ahead, we still have the land use plan that would be applicable?
Yes, the land use plan was adopted.
I guess I'll go around the horn. Commissioner Culberson, do you have a comment?
Not this time.
Commissioner Cause?
Not at this time.
Nothing here to add.
If we just take no action.
So there's 3 options. One is take no action and the land use plan stays intact and we will not proceed with the rezoning. One of the options is to go ahead, and it did go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. It's already had its public hearing. It would be go ahead and put it on the agenda for, sorry about that, I had a timer set. I forgot to turn it off for the last speaker. To put it on the agenda for the board to consider the rezoning, and we would renotice the folks who live down there that you were going to do that. Or the third option would be if you modified what was approved at the Planning Commission, then it would need to be go back to the Planning Commission and start the process over. So any of those options work for us. We just need to know so we know what to do.
Or we could kick it down the pipe until Commissioner Smith is with us.
You can always table items and move and discuss them later. Obviously, we have that as an option, but it wasn't an option in here because we were looking for clear direction from the board.
So is there any comments?
I'm in support of option 2. It's the only way to move it forward. So,
This is Commissioner Cos. I would like to look at option number 2.
Option 2 is to send it to the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I didn't take those options in order that are on the agenda. I just was shooting from the top of my head. So
Mark's option 2.
I think you want number 1 was set a date certain for the board to consider it. Option 2 is to modify the proposed rezoning and send it back to the Planning Commission. And option 3 was to just let it drop. So just to be
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant option 1.
Okay.
This is Mr. Cos.
Sorry for not doing those in order.
So that would be what, the first week of December?
No, sir. That would not be the first week of December. I think the earliest we could get it would be December 16th. We need to allow 20 days of notice. So
This would be the second notice.
Yeah, well, because it was tabled last time and we didn't table it to a
Right.
date certain, we believe that'd be correct too. And some of the property ownership may have changed in that area as well.
So one of the suggestions by folks down in that area was that if you would rezone north of Hempel and keep the industrial by the turnpike entrance and just go north of Hempel up to where the industrial park is. That was a suggestion. It had a majority support in my survey down there. whereas the full rezone did not. So that would be sort of modifying, but you're saying that if we were going to modify, we have to send it back to the Planning Commission? Would that suggest, would we tell them we give you this suggestion, or how would that work?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, this is David Van Paris. Under Kansas statutes, if you're going to significantly modify a proposed rezoning, and you know that in advance, by modifying what was recommended to you by the Planning Commission, it needs to start again in the Planning Commission. Rezoning is contemplated that it starts with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission conducts the public hearing, provides the public notice and specific notice to the property owners. They, after that hearing, send to you recommendations. If you wish to substantially modify those recommendations but continue with the rezoning, you should start again. And the purpose of that, I think it's apparent, is to provide adequate notice to the property owners as to what will actually be the intended result.
So if it went back to the Planning Commission, would we tell them we want it to be modified in this manner, or would we?
I think you are required to provide the Planning Commission some guidance as to what issue you wish them to re-examine with respect to the rezoning.
This is Commissioner Cos. I feel that there was a lot of work that went into the recommendations for the County Road 1 rezoning, to include all of the meetings that happened in Tonganoxie at the fairgrounds, and the time and energy that was put into it, the effort that was made by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I just think that we need to go ahead and move forward with the process.
So to move forward with option 1, you need a motion to set a date certain.
That would be preferred, yes.
Okay. I'll make a motion to move forward with the notifications and a date set certain for the County Road 1 rezone for December 16th.
There's a motion on
Commissioner Culberson, second.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion? Commissioner Culberson, do you have anything to add?
No, I do not.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, that would be December 16th at 9 a.m. You need to set a date and time certain.
Is that acceptable to modify your motion? Is that okay with you, Commissioner Culberson?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. So, Commissioner Cos, did you have a further comment?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Mr. Shimke, further comment? I would say that I had 2 town hall meetings. I surveyed the people down in that area. There are majority support for moving ahead with the rezoning north of Hempel, including light industrial by the turnpike and the industrial park in Tonganoxie, but leaving the area south of there R2.5. Majority of the people support that. If you just ask them about rezone the way it was proposed, opposition. So if we're willing to modify it, I'll vote for it. Otherwise, I'm going to oppose this.
This is Commissioner Culberson for discussion. I think it's important to point out, I'm hoping through the next set of meetings and public comments, that people understand that just changing the zoning does not mandate that the people that own the property right now have to change what they're using the property for. So I think there's a lot of confusion when somebody's living in a residential home on 20 acres, and if they're going to get changed in the zoning modification to commercial or industrial, for instance, that doesn't mean that they have to start using it for industrial or commercial. They can continue to use the property as is as long as they want to. And I think a lot of this confusion that people are upset about the change is because they think but they have to change the use of the property as soon as we adopt this zoning law. And I think it's just a lack of, educating people and letting them know that you can continue to use it as a farm. If it's a farm right now, you continue to use it as a farm, even if we zone it commercial. That's all I wanted to say.
Mr. Cos?
I have no further comment, thank you.
Mr. Shimke?
I'm good.
All right. That being said, I guess we'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, Commissioner Culberson?
I vote aye.
Commissioner Cos?
Aye.
Mr. Shimke?
Aye.
And Chairman votes no. All right.
That was everything under administrative business.
Okay, I guess is there a motion to... Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Oh, and did we need to take anything out of there, Commissioner Cos?
Pardon me, I couldn't hear you.
Did we need to separate the consent agenda today or not?
Oh, yes. Please remove the check register from the consent agenda.
Okay. Do you want to modify your motion?
I'll modify my motion to exclude the check register.
And,
Commissioner Culberson, second.
okay, there's a motion to approve the consent agenda less the check register. Voting, Commissioner Culberson.
Aye.
Commissioner Cos.
Aye.
Or were you abstaining?
It's just,
I'm sorry, I
it's without the
abstained.
check register.
Okay.
No, I
No,
vote
this one
aye.
is-
No, you haven't voted for that
That's
one.
right. It's the next one. Got it. Not used to doing this, John.
Right. Commissioner Shimke votes aye.
You have to abstain the check register.
And I vote aye. Okay, now a motion for the check register.
I'll make a motion to approve the check register as presented.
Commissioner Culberson, second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Approve the check register. All those in voting, Commissioner Culberson.
Aye.
Commissioner Cos.
Abstain.
Mr. Shimke.
Aye.
And aye. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the formal board action. Consider distribution of historical societies and museums.
Commissioners, this item was on the agenda earlier this year, but it was decided at that time to kind of hold off to see how our budget might be impacted by COVID before we decided on discretionary spending like this. At that time, we had mentioned it would be probably November when we discussed it, so we wanted to bring it back forward. There's $50,000 budgeted. That is our normal annual appropriation for these types of expenditures. Last year, the way the board handled it was the number of requests divided by the amount allocated, and then they fully funded requests that were underneath that amount, and then they divvied the rest up equally amongst all. And you can see that via the previous year's report, where some of these folks got $8,126 and two got slightly less than that because that was their full request. So that being said, I know there are a few people here representing some of these programs, and there's also, I think, some calling in. So I will leave it at that and let the board move forward.
Okay. Does Becky have that list? Or who's going to anybody in here wants to comment on that?
I think you could start with, so is there anybody from Baser Historical Museum in the audience or on the phone?
Yes. I'm Mary Leonard with the Baser Historical Museum Society.
Mary, did you have any comments that you would like to share on your request to the board?
Well, unfortunately, I'm a little unprepared. I've not done this previously. It's been handled by our chairman of the board, Ken Massengill, and he's been ill the last couple of weeks, so I'm just trying to fill in here. I know that we had made a request. I don't have the actual request here in front of me. I know what we requested in 2019, but we do still have many of the same types of needs funding for our programs that typically are repeat kind of programs each year. Of course, we still have utility needs, and then this year we had some building upkeep and repairs, some roofing needs that have not yet been taken care of. And then there's always the need as new artifacts come in, excuse me, for additional display boards and freestanding walls, that kind of thing. So again, I don't have the specifics of what was requested, but we do still have a need, and we appreciate anything that the county commissioners can do for us.
Does anyone have any questions of her? Commissioner Culberson, questions?
I just wanted to add that to what Mark said. I think last year or the year before, it's important to bring up the fact that we kind of changed gears on this money awarding to historical museums, that we were matching funds. I don't think we did that in previous years. We just started that last year, I think, where we said they have to show that they match the amount that they're asking for from the county. So I don't think that made any difference as far as anybody not getting any money, but I think it's important to point out that that's actually what we're doing.
Yes, that is correct, that there's a matching portion that's required. As long as they can demonstrate within their budget that they receive funds in excess of what they would normally get from us or what they receive from us, then that satisfies their match.
Okay, and of course that's
Mr. Cos? Commissioner Cos, you're recognized.
I have nothing to offer at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Shimke?
Mr. Shimke.
Yeah, weren't there also care funds being discussed?
That would be next week's agenda. That was not this week's agenda. The committee wanted to hold that for next week until after these were considered.
Seems out of order.
Well, because the expenditures are not, I guess COVID has nothing to do or related with these funds, whereas the CARES Act funds are specifically related to COVID expenditures or loss in revenue.
Right.
So that's why the committee had asked that they be handled on different days.
Okay. It just seems like the loss in revenue, the business impact, the hardships that probably most, if not all, have experienced in 2020 would be some of the reasons why maybe more funds would be needed than usual, or why the requests may have grown because they can't cash flow the needed repairs or changes. So I thought it might make more sense to see if those funds could help meet these requests. But
okay.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Cos had something to add.
Did you have something, Commissioner Cos?
I think Commissioner Simpson's concern that, we still only have the $50,000 maximum to distribute between the requesting projects for the Historical Society. So I really think that it's kind of a drop in the bucket compared to what some of the costs of, and the impact of the COVID on the Historical Societies as a whole.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You want the Tonganoxie Historical Museum is the next on the list. Is there anybody here or on the phone from Tonganoxie?
Come on up.
Okay.
So my name is Chris Roberts. I live at 24101 195th Street in Leavenworth, and I'm representing the Tonganoxie Community Historical Society. Do you have our letter?
we do.
I don't know how much time you want me to spend on this.
Well, just spend a couple minutes.
Okay. So when we wrote this letter, we put together what we called phase one of working on the Reno Methodist Church, which is a building on our site. And we were going to do half of the stained glass windows. And then we were also going to fix the front door, repaint it, rework portions of the front door. In the interim, because we were not sure exactly what would happen with county funds, we also went to the Pete and Margaret Leidy grant, which we have access to in Tonganoxie, and basically said, we want to do this project very much. And we got those monies. In fact, we picked them up the same day that Becky called to say I needed to be here today. So because it was phase one, this project always had an anticipated phase two. And phase two is pretty much a mirror image of phase one. And I could certainly rewrite the letter. I did not do that, and I couldn't have done it last week before Thursday at 5. I apologize. I had a full day that day, and I just had got the time. But let me tell you real briefly. It would be a two-part project, just like phase one, and roughly the same amount of money on the stained glass windows, roughly about $5,700. We have one window that will require a little bit more. Because we're also doing ceiling work in phase one, we are not doing that in phase two. But what we are doing is addressing 9 other windows on the church that need to be reglazed, painted, and have some sort of storm window put on. We're going to do a very simple storm window. And we're also going to replace 2 exterior doors on the church, one that leads to the basement and a staircase down to the fellowship hall, and then one that leads to our wheelchair lift. Both those doors have been on the building for over 20 years, and I'm not even sure one of them was an exterior door to begin with. So we want to make that kind of remedy. Ends up being the same amount of money. And I will tell you that we generally budget this rough amount because it seems to be fair. It seems to be a workable number, both for the Leidy grant and the county. So if you would like me to resubmit something to clarify that, I can certainly do that.
I think that's necessary. No, we don't want you to.
Okay. Then are there any questions, I guess?
Any questions?
No questions.
Thank you very much. And what's your as far as open to the public? Have you been restricted still, or
we are still restricted? Here's what we've done. We are open for volunteers 2 mornings every week. We have restructured who comes in. We don't allow more than one person in a work area. We have 3 work areas inside the museum, and our guys who work outside doing lawn maintenance, those volunteers are outside. They generally don't wear their masks if they're on the mowers, but we do wear masks inside. We do allow visitors. Now, I will tell you that we've never had huge numbers knocking at our doors. And so we have been able to do some things with visitors. We've had a lot more research requests. We can bring people in on an appointment basis, work with them in our barn, which is a huge room, and we feel like we can socially distance in there and get good airflow. And we do some very minor tours, some small tours.
But school tours are probably
the schools
out,
didn't
right?
happen this year. I don't think that and that's been disappointing. Now we have collaborated with the public library in Tonganoxie to create some programs that teachers have requested. So we're able to do some work. Our numbers aren't what they were last year. But so far, we've been safe, and we have not had any cases, and so we're pleased. And we really appreciate the county considering this. Thank you.
Any idea what sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just curious, do you know what the impact has been year over year as far as traffic?
I think it's slightly down. I haven't done the numbers yet. We'll do the numbers at the end of December. So, it has, it's been down, obviously. We didn't get the school kids. That's 150 to 180 right off the bat.
Okay.
And we haven't had any programs. So
I'll quickly go around the horn. Commissioner Culberson, do you have a question or comment?
Nope, I have nothing.
Commissioner Cause?
No, I don't.
All right, and thank you very much.
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate everything you do.
The next on the list would be C.W. Parker Carousel Museum.
My name is Hugh West. I am the new president of the Leavenworth Historical Museum Association. And
Congrats.
Congratulations.
I was president 20 years ago of the organization as we grew and expanded and that kind of stuff. The request that were put in was before I was actually involved again. But on there, most of this has to do with either improving or replacing ACs, that type of stuff in the First City Museum. Also in the C.W. Parker Carousel, there's been a 2 or 3 year plan where one furnace or boiler or whatever was put in, and it wasn't working right. So what we've done is turned around, and the county's been very gracious to help us put in gas furnaces, which saves a ton of money for utilities and that type of stuff. The effects of the COVID on us, the other one I should say is the National Fred Harvey Museum, and on that one there's a request for funds for refinishing the floors, doing some of the interior work, and also I think some doors might be in there too. Our COVID, usually our museum brings in, the 3 museums brings in around 25,000 people, actually physical people, into Leavenworth. 95% of that is outside the community, and so we get a lot of tour buses, and hopefully a lot of the tour buses are such that they will actually stay in Leavenworth, maybe have a meal, do that kind of stuff, spend some money. So anyway, we appreciate everything the county's done over the years. We're going to be getting in a situation where the First City Museum is going to try and open 2 days a week instead of 1 day a week. On the National Fred Harvey Museum, instead of just having private tours, towards the middle to the end of next year, we're actually going to have it open up regular hours on a 1 day a week basis, that kind of stuff. We're using these funds to help some of the expense we've already done. Since we thought we were going to get it earlier in the year, we went ahead and started on some of the projects, so we've already spent money to go against the grants we hope to get. I guess the thing I would say is in the coming years you're going to see us expand. We're also hooking up with a number of people across the country to get donations and new exhibits and that type of stuff. And we want to take the C.W. Parker Carousel from being the largest attraction in Leavenworth County and the city of Leavenworth, and also it's been recognized as one of the best exhibits in the state of Kansas. So we want to expand on that. So we hope we're bringing in additional revenues for the county, along with providing good exhibits and stuff for the local people. Any questions?
Commissioner Culberson, do you have a question?
Nope.
Commissioner Cause?
No, I don't.
Chad?
No, I'd just say keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
The next would be Leavenworth County Historical Society Carroll Mansion Museum.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
I'm Lisa Weekley. I'm currently the president of the Leavenworth County Historical Society, and I thank you for your time this morning. I need a little clarification, though. I was under the impression that our presentation would be associated with the CARES Act. I was not aware that it would go back to our original request that was done in August of that. That being said, I don't have that particular letter in front of me. I came with our information regarding the CARES Act, but I can still, of course, address that. Our main request at that time in August was to address our needs for the porch repairs that were done, our maintenance. Currently, we've applied several times, at least 4 times to the state of Kansas for grants for brick and mortar repairs, and we have been turned down all 4 of those times. because it's a very competitive grant on that. Basically, any of the other funding sources that we've looked into and grants that we have tried do not apply for brick and mortar projects on that. So the county funding that we look at here for Leavenworth is probably our best and major source that we can use for brick and mortar projects. Example would be last time you asked if we apply for city funding on that, and we do apply for city support through their CBB grants, but those are not brick and mortar projects that qualify. They qualify by bringing tourism into the community, so they support our programs and our fundraising efforts when we bring outside people into the community, such as an example would be our largest fundraiser is the Vintage Homes Tour. That reaches out to multiple communities and also in the Kansas City metro area and in St. Joe and even out of state and as far as Nebraska and several other surrounding states. So that qualifies as a project that we can apply for city funding request for. We do desperately still need, and it's becoming very visibly apparent, that we do need to start repairing the porch on that. If you would come and look at the facility and the pictures that we had provided before, really show the wear and tear, especially in the last 4 years on that. That's 4 hard winters that it's had to support that. So we would appreciate any funding support that you can so we can start that. We have been delayed in doing what we can because, of course, with the impact COVID has had on us. And we've adjusted and adapted to these times. We are still, we did have to shut down mandatory when the community started opening. We slowly also started to reopen. We are again, and have been for the last several months, open full-time. Our regular hours are Tuesday through Saturday, 10:30 to 4:30. Many of our volunteers have felt uncomfortable coming back, so we have used this time. Some of those projects that they were working on are on hold, which mainly deals with our collection and the preservation on that. We've used this downtime, as we called it, since our activity has been less, and we haven't been able to do our fundraising activities because those are mass gathering events, and it's difficult to do anything like that now. They've had to be canceled just like everything. We've adapted to like any small business really has. We require a mask that you come in. We don't really have large tours that come in anymore. A lot of those that come through CBB, and those have been canceled. So mostly our tours that come in are really small groups, couples, 4 people, 4 to 6 people at maximum. We've had to adjust to social distancing and mask wearing. We have done contact tracing as much as we can. We collect that information. So if we did have an incident where we knew someone had contracted COVID or tested positive that came in contact with our facility, we would be able to do an outreach to the community and to the county and say these are the people that were attending our facility or our staff had been, on those particular times. Hand sanitizer stations. It's a challenge for a Victorian house because there are places that you cannot wipe down with bleach in a Victorian house. So we've even sometimes in our tours and that social distancing is a little difficult, so we've adapted to that and new criteria. It's made us rethink. It's also made us appreciate history. We talk a lot right now currently of the science, that is, but the history also is on our side in this. And you spent a lot of time on the mask mandate. There's a lot of history to support that this was it. 100 years ago when they dealt with the last pandemic, the only thing they had were sanitary, washing their hands, those type of things, and a mask to wear.
They didn't even have antibiotics.
No, they didn't. And there was no vaccine on the horizon, and potentially now we're looking very positive on that. They didn't even have that as a concept that they could even. They had just the grace of God, washing their hands in a mask, to get them through that period. So we've adapted, but we still are open for business. We used the time to, since we were very low on personnel there, our staff, we have 3 people. One person chose not to come back, so our staff is now 3 part-timers on that. They keep the day-to-day operations going. Our board has met on a regular basis. For social distancing, we've done Zoom meetings when things are very bad. During the summer months, the benefits of having a Victorian house is we get to meet on the porch, and we can social distance on the porch. And we've done now a combination in the winter. We'll probably do Zoom meetings again and distancing in one of our larger rooms on that. So it's been a challenge for us on that. But we have managed to keep our operations going. We still consider ourselves one of the top attractions in the city, and we are anxious to keep it that way, so we hope that you can support our grant request. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Culberson, do you have any questions?
No question.
Commissioner
Claus? I just have one thing, Mike.
Oh, go ahead.
And the reason that I brought up the matching funds thing was because I thought this year would be particularly difficult for them to be able to do that because of the COVID. So I just wanted to make sure that was part of it.
Okay. Commissioner Cause?
No, I have no questions or comments. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to say thanks for the backups and the quotes and the pictures. It's all very helpful to better understand the situation, so thank you.
Thank you for all you do. Appreciate it.
I have just one more question. It was mentioned that next week you'll be meeting to discuss the CARES funding.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a date set on that?
Time, it'll be at the commission meeting at 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. And is that next Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Might see you again, huh?
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see us again. Thank you so much.
All right. And let's see who's next. Richard Allen Cultural Center.
I don't believe they were able to attend today. I think they mentioned that they may not be able to make it, so that would be it then. The rest of them were covered.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Cos. Yes, Mrs. Wagner had a death in her immediate family, and the individual who was asked to back up is dealing with the COVID situation. So no, they were not able to be here today.
Okay. Commissioner Cos, were they able to get their documents in for the CARES Act from the Richard Allen?
Yes, they did.
Okay. All right. So I guess we need to have a motion.
So you can take them one at a time, or you can handle them like last year. Obviously, just quick math says that if you do it like last year, the Baser Historical Museum would receive 100% what they're requesting, and everybody else would receive $8,073. Or you can do one by one. Your call.
Well, this is pretty close on the back of the napkin.
Okay, so go ahead, Commissioner Cos. You're recognized.
Thank you. I would suggest that we go with the same formula that we used last year.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion that we, what was the number?
So it would be the Baser Historical Museum would receive $1,560, and the other requests would receive $8,073.
So that's the motion on the floor and been seconded. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, voting. Commissioner Culberson?
Aye.
Commissioner Cos?
Aye.
Commissioner Shimke?
Aye.
And Chairman votes aye.
I just hope that next week we can close the gap on the rest of it. So.
Okay. This will be good. Building codes.
What an intro.
Good morning, Crystal.
This will be good.
Good Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Can Commissioner Culbertson and Commissioner Cos, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Try not to blow out your eardrums by talking too loudly. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I have before you a request for Resolution 2020-39. This is a resolution to adopt the 2006 International Building Codes and the 2006 International Residential Code for 1 and 2 family dwellings with certain modifications described in the attached resolution. As we spoke about previously, the majority of those modifications to the resolution have to do with enforcement and have to do with setting up a building codes department, which we at this time have decided that we are not going to pursue those things. So that's what those modifications are. The last time this was before you, the board asked for a couple of small updates. One of them was to clarify that this does indeed apply to commercial buildings. That has been clearly identified in the resolution. Excuse me. Furthermore, the board asked staff to attempt to find a cohesive definition for what a barn home was, and then attempt to perhaps exclude barn homes from this resolution. Staff was unable to do that. I, along with Mr. Van Paris and Mr. Lockery, we worked together. I also reached out to other municipalities. The overwhelming feedback that I received was there are barn homes being built in other municipalities in the Kansas City metro, and they are considered just residential structures. There is no cohesive definition that would allow us to easily exempt them. It's staff's opinion that if we were to attempt to do that, we are going to open up a Pandora's box that will be very, very difficult to enforce, and that we will spend a significant amount of time asking our building codes committee to determine whether or not this is a barn home or it's not a barn home. Therefore, staff's recommendation is that barn homes are considered residential structures, and they are covered in the resolution. That's all I have on this. Obviously, staff recommends approval. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Okay, are there questions? And I'll start with Commissioner Culbertson.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Commissioner Cos.
No question.
Mr. Shimke.
I just add a lot of this came out of the storm that Linwood experienced, and the reality is, I think between fires, floods, storm damage, force majeure events, there's a lot of people that are clearly negatively impacted, and this sounds like a way to get the most value and best improvements to their existing homes and structures and get the value out of insurance they've been paying for weeks, months, years, decades that they've not been able to maximize. So to be clear, though, one of my big concerns on this, because I think for any downside as far as the select homes that might try to be built to a standard that isn't a 2006 type recommendation. On the commercial side, which is where we were talking about, if you have a facility that's going to have customers regularly, why that's such a concern. We talked about, again, codes today can get pretty rigorous on the commercial side when it comes to sprinklers because of the size of the facility and this, that, and the other. And that's clearly a non-starter for almost every one of these scenarios. They're too far away from infrastructure to support those requirements. And I think that's a silly requirement anyway, for what it's worth. But how is that being addressed? Or how would it be addressed? Or they'd have to come in and ask for a variance every single time?
Well, so first, I think it's important to note that not all commercial developments that are being developed will be unable to meet those requirements. Some of them, yes, but certainly not all of them.
Well, anything can be solved with money. It's got to be economical.
Well, but some of them can be solved, depending upon where they are. There are areas in the county where water is available and fire suppression can be, not everywhere, certainly, but there are areas that it can be. Second, to your point, yes, money can solve significant problems, right? We know that. And third is that if it's just really impossible and it cannot be accomplished, then that's what effectively the zoning board, the appeals board is for those individuals to come forward and ask for some sort of variance to the code. That's why I think it's really important that when we set up that appeals board, that it is a structure with professionals and not just people from out in the county, but people who really are building official, or people who are in the building industry and are able to work with the developers. I think it's also important to note that while we do have some commercial development out in the county, that is certainly not what the vast majority of our development is. The vast majority of our development is residential development. Furthermore, some of that commercial development that we do have, it exceeds square footage requirements in that it has to be approved by the state fire marshal anyway. So any requirements that they would have would be potentially above and beyond what Leavenworth County has if they are going to comply with the state regulations, which is one of the requirements for those sorts of developments. I'm thinking of like wedding barns and event centers and that sort of thing.
What is that threshold?
I don't know that number off the top of my head. I know it's a square footage. Not all of them meet it. And then certainly there are some that get exemptions because they may be like an old barn that is being converted, but for new structures, schools and that sort of thing. So again, there is a mechanism for when it's just really not possible. I would be hesitant to want to exempt all commercial structures. Again, I feel like that opens up a Pandora's box.
So there was a question by the Tonganoxie Township Fire Department by the chief, and he stated he was questioning why we were going to use codes that were 2006. He's suggesting we shouldn't use any codes older than 2012, and he says that there's only one community in the county that's still using codes older than 2012. So can you kind of comment on that?
Yeah, of course. So I think this is something that we've spoken about previously. The Building Codes Committee that was convened, as you all know, initially put forward a recommendation of they overwhelmingly believe that the county needs building codes. They also felt that the county needed enforcement. Originally, they had talked about potentially going with the 2018 code, but that was when they were under the impression that enforcement was an option. However, when it was brought before them that enforcement at this time was not an option, their enthusiasm, I suppose, for implementing the newer code was certainly diminished. And one of the things that came up quite a bit was that by having the 2018 code, which is obviously the newest code, right? One, there are certain environmental and sustainability factors that many of the communities who have updated to the 2012 codes and even the 2018 codes, they're exempting those things anyway. But then secondarily, without a building official, without someone at the county who is an expert in those sorts of things, were we putting an undue burden on developers who are they going to turn to essentially if they had questions about how to interpret the code? So the 2006 codes, it was believed was they were codes that people, especially developers, should be very familiar with. They've been around for some time. They do provide a level of protection. They do not have the extensive sustainability and environmental controls that the 2012 and the 2018 codes have. So it's believed by the committee that the 2006 was a really great place to start. Certainly, if these codes are adopted and we establish a building codes appeal board, one of their responsibilities will be to yearly review the building codes and then to make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners on whether or not those codes need to be updated or amended.
Okay, we'll go around the horn again. Is there any other questions from you, Commissioner Culberson?
I just want to make a suggestion, or I guess a request maybe. When the board goes to make a motion on this, to more accurately represent the constituents of my district, I think it's one of the things that's clear is the county is widely different from the south end to the north end on many different things, and building codes I think is one of them. But I'd like to suggest that when we make a motion, we exempt my district from the building code, which could be described as political boundaries, Easton and Kickapoo Township. I also have personally talked to both fire chiefs from Easton and Kickapoo Townships, they both do not want building codes. So I want to point that out also.
I want to ask the county councilor, would that violate equal protection?
That's so esoteric a question.
I mean,
would prefer
to divide it by district?
I'll tell you, for practical purposes and all purposes before you know. The statute does contemplate that building codes can be implemented either countywide in the unincorporated areas or in parts of the county. So that's at your discretion.
Okay. Commissioner Cause.
The one thing that I wonder in this situation, and with what Commissioner Culbertson is asking for, although I do not object to that, I think that we might want to consider tabling the adoption of the code until we have all 5 commissioners present to vote, and that's given if there is a tie vote, is my point, because as we all know, Commissioner Smith can't be with us, but I would foresee that in the not too distant future, he will be able to be back, or at least back by phone.
There's no problem with us revisiting it, would there be? If we did.
Well, I think if you did end in a tie, you could always put it back on an agenda for further consideration, or you could leave it. If it ties, obviously that's it fails to be adopted.
Okay. Did you have anything else, Commissioner Cause?
No, I just think that it would be incumbent upon us just to wait, just to ensure that there is not any tie.
Is that a motion to table?
Yes, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And there's a motion to table on the floor. Is there discussion?
Well, did you want to take a vote, and then if it is a tie, table it?
No, I think we're just going to table it.
Yeah, I think Vicki makes a great point. I mean, it's obviously a point of great contention where we've had a lot of feedback over time. I think having the full board present or participating, given it's a countywide decision, makes a lot of sense.
Okay, voting, Commissioner Culbertson?
Abstain.
Commissioner Cause?
Aye.
Mr. Shimke?
Aye.
And Chairman votes aye. All right.
We did not table that to a date specific, correct?
There's no public hearing, so we just table it. They can.
Yeah, I think the fear would be if we said next week, we'd have to maybe move it another week.
Right, you might not have everybody.
So
mark that off.
Is there a way to? Because again, the announcement has to go out, and we may not know if Doug can be here.
Commissioner Shimke, I think Mark will keep in contact with Commissioner Smith, and at such time as he can appear and provide proper notice for your agenda, it'll be placed on that.
Okay.
All right. Recognize Mr. Knoll. Or was that? Are you handling that?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Knoll is here for any questions that you may have and moral support. Commissioners, I have before you Resolution 2020-46. This is a resolution to adopt a professional development fee policy and a couple of amendments to the planning and zoning fee schedule. This is a topic that we have spoken about extensively over the last several months. As you know, you were provided with a few different examples of developments which have been submitted to the county. In that, you have a spreadsheet that shows what their fees that were paid for their application are, and then you also have a document that shows what the total development, what the total professional fee reviews were. You can see that in almost every scenario, the professional development fees vastly exceeded by several times the application fees. We also, as we went back and we looked through those, we kind of saw a common theme and a common thread, if you will. That was that special use permits, which are renewals or they're things that are not terribly cumbersome to the county road network specifically, those do not require extensive reviews. and the application fee nearly covered the review. I am requesting that we increase our special use permit application fee from $300 to $400. Simply, that fee has not been increased in quite some time, as you can see on that spreadsheet. The public notice requirements eat up the vast majority of that fee. So by increasing it by $100, we should be covering all administrative costs as well. That's for things like you said, the renewals, the B&G Auto, the Lavery Woodworks, things that just really do not have a very large impact on the county roadway system. It's our recommendation that those sorts of special use permits, they'll just pay an application fee. If it were to come out that there is some unknown and it does cost substantially more, then they would be responsible for paying those additional fees, but it's unexpected. When we have things come forward, obviously like the sand plant that got brought up, or Tri-Pole, or some of those bigger developments where we know there are going to be unusual circumstances or there's going to be a significant impact to the county roadway system, meaning that it needs significant review, we will tell the applicants up front that they are going to be responsible for the review fees, so they understand that they'll be paying that. Furthermore, plats, which were just 3 or 4 lot plats that are located along a county roadway, again, those reviews were typically fairly inexpensive. The application fees typically paid for or almost all of the review fees, so we're not asking for developers to have to pay additional fees in that manner either. However, if there was a subdivision that was submitted and it had internal roadways, we knew immediately that there was going to be extensive reviews of that. And we believe that this policy clearly states that if you are submitting a subdivision plat and there are internal roadways, you need to know up front that you will be responsible for the professional development fees, of which they're pretty extensive. Again, you can go back and you can look at your spreadsheet that I provided you. The application fee does not cover even close the review fee. I know it's been brought up that there are building permits that are pooled on those, and certainly that is true oftentimes, but it's not always true. There are lots of lots out in the county that are undeveloped. So I don't think that is necessarily a great argument for why we shouldn't have development fees, but I will certainly leave that up to the board.
Okay, questions? Commissioner Culberson, do you have any questions? Commissioner Culberson?
Jeff, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm trying to find a mute button. No problem.
He said none.
No? Okay. Commissioner Cause?
No questions.
Okay. Commissioner Shimke?
So you make a great point, Chris. I know we've gotten some feedback as to kind of the return on investment, right, of time. So you do have instances where, again, there are building permits, and then if something is built, there's property tax for the lifetime of the property. What I thought from the get-go was we obviously wanted to solve for large or incredibly complex applications or developments. That was obvious, and we've brought up examples. The other side of it is I think there's some amount of expectation that with the fee, whether we can have an argument whether the fee is enough or not, but the fee that's paid should mean some amount of collaboration that's included in that fee. So maybe it's I'm going to submit, you're going to now get feedback, you have a chance to correct, any of those challenges, and then resubmit. And so I think that I maybe misunderstood. I think there's a certain amount of back and forth that's expected in anything. It's when the developer or applicant becomes troublesome or problematic, or professional opinions start to create conflict with our paid engineer, because we do. That's a contractor, right? It's good, bad, or otherwise. We're going to take the recommendations of our paid subject matter expert because it's in our best interest to do so. But I don't know that rather than saying every single dollar, that we accrue externally at $140 an hour or whatever it is, should be at the applicant. In my opinion, it's more about if the applicant or developer becomes problematic or complexity requires it. And so I don't know what that threshold is, but we have instances where we're going back and forth 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. That's clearly unacceptable, and I'm totally in support of those fees being passed on because it's our time and our cost with the consultant. But it seems like in the scenarios where I've made the analogy of, are we using a fire hose when we could use a squirt gun? Again, thinking that there are still going to be building permits and there's still going to be property tax, and there's clearly an ROI on our resources as well as our paid consultant. So any thought about what that could or should look like versus,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So
entry point?
So that's part of the reason that we have broken this out into, like I said, the simple special use permits, where we know that those are going to be covered. I think if we get into the discussion about, well, if a developer becomes problematic, then they have to pay the fee. That's very subjective. Who determines whether or not they're problematic? Where do we determine that? What we have found as we've gone through and looked back at these numbers, which is what we were asked to do, is that any time there is an internal roadway system, even the initial review is significantly more than the application fee. Which is why I think it's important. Let's say that if we can submit an application and they pay $2,000 application fee, and we get a round of comments back, and they address every single comment, and the bill from the consultant is $1,800. Well, I think then we could make an argument and say, well, they don't need to pay anything extra. I think that's very unlikely. But I think at that point we could say, hey, this didn't exceed your application fee.
Sure.
What we know is that when there is an internal roadway system, that it's going to exceed that application fee.
And I don't want to make it subjective because you give an inch, everyone takes a mile. Maybe it's a certain set of number of hours, right? So maybe it's not we can go back and forth once or we can go back and forth 3 times. It's we're going to budget and say you get 10 hours worth of consulting time. And if you exceed that, that's clearly because there's complexity and you're going to be responsible for hours 11 through 1 million. Then there is nothing subjective about it. That's how much we're budgeting because we think on the majority of our projects that's sufficient enough time for our outside consultant to provide the feedback that we need to manage whatever SUP or development or anything else. So that way they know. And again, I don't think that puts a lot of risk on us. I mean, we know exactly what that's going to cost in addition to our county fee, just as an example.
Yeah.
That way we don't have to figure out who's being problematic.
Sure.
Or why egos are creating issues of getting houses built. I feel like that's very stupid.
Neighboring counties, similar policies to this, or?
So neighboring counties, especially the larger counties, they don't have these policies because they have very large engineering staffs. Johnson County, for instance, has about 15 engineers on staff, so they don't have a consultant. We have a community here in Leavenworth County, it's the city of Basehor, who does not have an engineering staff. They have a policy that is a little bit stricter than this one, in fact, that is just if there are any engineering fees that are associated with your application, you'll pay for it. I've spoken extensively with their city administrator. It is her opinion that this policy has not slowed down growth and development in the city of Basehor. There was certainly some pushback in the beginning. It's her opinion that as they have gone through this and it has been implemented, that the quality of their applications has certainly improved because, as you can probably imagine, developers don't want to pay any more money than they absolutely have to. So certainly there's a hope, that would happen. That's what everybody wants. Nobody at the staff level enjoys things sitting around for months and months at a time while we're trying to tie up loose ends. That's how things get lost and that's how mistakes get made. But that's what ends up happening and has been happening for quite some time. As you can imagine, it's very frustrating not only for us but for the developers as well and for you all when you get the phone calls that says staff isn't doing their job. And certainly if this board wants to set a threshold for a number of hours or something, I think that's something that staff would certainly be willing to do. I think the intention really of the policy was more so that developers knew up front that if you're submitting a large development, especially one with an internal roadway system, or again something like the lineate sand plant or something along those lines, that you are going to incur additional fees. I don't know what those additional fees are going to be. Largely those additional fees are going to be up to the developer on how much they want to cooperate with the county, right? And again, I think that there is room for interpretation, or maybe it needs to be clarified, that if you're able to bring in a development, and even if it has an internal roadway, then you don't exceed your application fee. And even if we say by a set percentage, if you want to say by 10% or 15% or something along those lines, then staff can say, okay, you don't have to pay those additional fees. But really, this is just a policy so that it's up front. The last thing we want is for a developer to come back and say, well, you didn't tell me I was going to have to do that, and now you're telling me I owe you an extra $6,000.
So I'd like to ask Mr. Herring, since you're in the room here still, you made comments that to make this policy pro-development and maybe we need to look at some things to be modified or changed. What are 2 or 3 things that you think we should do different, or what are your suggestions?
I don't want to speak for all developers, but these costs that have come out, they're not broken down. We don't know how they were derived. I mean, obviously they're on a per hour basis, but we've had several communications with staff. I have, and some of the problems that have arisen were, Lenape, of course. There was a development that had 5 full reviews, that had a significant road design that has 2 times the road as another project. That wasn't a problem getting through, but it had the same review fee. So I just wonder how they got to that. So more of a precise, what are they going to be reviewing? Obviously they're not reviewing surveys. We've had that discussion. They're not reviewing, like drainage calcs and stuff that can be handled by staff. And like I said earlier in my comments, staff has now taken on some of that work and, reducing, I think, what has been paid out to Olson, yet still don't know how much Olson has received.
Well, if we went ahead and adopted this, is that not things that could be worked out post-adoption?
And it's always easier to work it out first than try to change it. And, you're asking for developers to start day one to pay for Olson. And I'm going to use Olson. I don't know if you guys are going to bid this out. Several outstanding firms within our area that can work on that. What's going to happen when Olson, what is their drive to actually approve it on the first go? They make less money. I'm not saying they're doing that. I'm just saying it has the ability to have that appearance. Can they compete in our county? We have a very competent county surveyor downstairs. He can't compete in our county for any work. He's a county employee. In essence, whoever you award this bid to is a county employee. Are they out of work for the county? Things like that I think that developers should get a better chance to talk about. Yes, it has been discussed in here in passing for most of the time. There was a work session that, unfortunately I could not attend, and I know the other developers really weren't aware of it that I've spoken to, and they would just like some more time to put some.
Because I don't think anybody wants to make it more difficult. We want to make it easier and make it so you have a planned, so you know what to expect.
Right. When you start throwing out numbers of $30,000, $40,000 for a review, yes, that's extensive, and that shouldn't be on the taxpayers. You start throwing out. I think 2 of the interior road projects were at $7,000. One was at $2,000 or $3,000. Is that extensive? It is when the road design for one of the projects was $9,000 and the review came back at $7,000, $7,400. That's extensive. But that's an extensive review process. Was it needed? Was it required? Was it justified? I don't know. They don't know. They weren't allowed to talk to them. They weren't allowed to discuss why are we having this.
Bill, I don't know how long we're going to go with new points here. I can highlight some of these things. I don't know how appropriate the conversation is for this discussion, but specifically, Mr. Herring is speaking about Eagle Crossing and Pride Estates, I believe, right, in Rock Ridge subdivision.
Those are the only 3 internal road subdivisions we've had in 10 years, so it's all we have to base it on.
So we're talking about those 3 subdivisions. So Eagle Crossing is the one that we had multiple reviews on, 5 reviews for the roadway design. And we made the initial comments. Those comments that Olson made did not change from the first initial review significantly. There might have been some small tweaks as the reviews went on, but it was a consistent review of the plan set.
and some additional comments were addressed. Secondary to that, I believe, isn't it Rock Ridge on 158th Street, or is that Pride Estate? Biloxi Lane, Rock Ridge subdivision. So I believe that's what you're referencing as far as the costs are being in a similar category between two different engineering firms and two different groups that had similar type of costs associated with them, with not the same issues with the roadway. And so the difference between those two reviews was on the Rock Ridge subdivision, there was an issue with the drainage easement and the language of that drainage easement, and the consultant engineer and the communications that went back and forth regarding the language and the dedication of that drainage easement is what led to some of those review costs. And so there's different aspects of these reviews. And so what I think is important to remember is, as staff is consistent with their reviews, these requirements will not change. And so as that occurs, it should be every contractor, Mr. Herring's firm, and all contractors should have the ability to hand in a pretty much finalized subdivision plat. And so if you have not worked in the county before, and this is what Joe and I discussed last week, if you haven't worked in the county before, or if we have a consistent review process, these aren't new discussions that need to be rehashed per development. And so if there is consistency in the design and consistency in the review, you would expect to see these review fees to be reduced over time. And so, like you're saying, there hasn't been an interior roadway developed in the county in some time, and these designs were submitted without past knowledge or what the review process was going to be and how some of the regulations were going to be interpreted. And so now that some of these interpretations have been made through these processes of these different subdivisions, you would expect to see more complete applications come forth and these review fees to be reduced because of that. If the firms are using the past applications as a template for the applications moving forward, we don't have to discuss and have this back and forth regarding the language on the plat for drainage easements or access management or drainage reports. And so as these things get ironed out, these processes should become faster, and which would reduce costs.
Okay, I'm going to go around the horn here. Commissioner Culberson.
I don't have anything to add.
Commissioner Cause.
I don't have anything to add other than I support the staff's recommendation.
Mr. Shimke.
Yeah, I mean, just my previous thought or recommendation would be is that so there is no confusion. I think a lot of this issue has been our approach today is far different than it was 3 years ago or it was 15 years ago. Our capabilities, our subject matter expertise, all of those things, right, wrong, or indifferent, are farly advanced than they used to be. At the same time, I don't want developers to be clueless of the expectations, which it sounds like we're working through some of that anyway, but the fees and the inconsistencies of fees or this and the other. We do know that everything we're doing with our consultant is T&M, I mean, it's time and material, it's just cost. And so I do think setting a threshold or a not to exceed number of hours would make a lot of sense. And so as the applicant is engaged, as those hours are increasing or the back and forth, the rounds of review are increasing, they know that the costs are increasing. So maybe it's worth their time to resolve that issue early rather than later because the fees are increasing. So I don't know what that, I mean, we can look at some of these. I don't know if that's 10 hours or 20 hours. I mean, there's obviously substantial benefit for the county over time if these projects come to fruition. So we want to set it at again, outside of the nickel and dime scenario, but clearly when it starts going thousands of dollars over our typical application or tens of thousands of dollars, which we've brought up, that's unnecessary, and that should be on the applicant when that happens. So that would be my only recommendation. If we can figure out
To your point about billing, I know Joe made this point, and I know that I think you're alluding to it. From a departmental standpoint, from my perspective, if these reviews aren't consistent and Olson's comments are changing throughout the process, that would be unacceptable. And so, from a staff perspective, I'd be back in front of you with, I'm sure, Joe's support, to make a recommendation to change that process. But I feel that, as these processes are continuing and as we are consistent with these processes, and so I don't expect to see any inconsistencies from a review process. And I know there was the concern brought up about there is no incentive for them to pass an application on their first review. Well, the incentive is that we have an expectation of services being delivered from a county perspective. And if that expectation of services isn't being delivered, we would then seek other consultants. And so from that perspective, I've seen enough of these subdivisions through the days, and if there's an issue that it doesn't seem to be practical or doesn't seem to align with county policy, I think it would be appropriate at that point to have a discussion like that. But I don't think we're at that point at this time. And I think that the consistency of not starting new firms on a 6-month, 12-month basis is important because we do want to be very consistent moving forward.
And I think we do want to conduct, you're holding them accountable. So to your question or point, Joe, it's our job to keep those costs down, regardless of how much they'd like to maybe see those costs go up. Lawyers have that ability too. And I do think on an annual review, sorry, Jeff, I've lost my train of thought there. I do think an annual review is necessary in making sure that we're holding that consultant accountable. And then ultimately we are going to bid and making sure that those retained resources, we're getting the best expertise that we can at the fairest dollar rate per hour as we continue to outsource those services, professional services.
Commissioners, this was brought forward at the request of the board for the fee reimbursements. It's been discussed probably 3 or 4 times at least over the last 6 or 7 months, including our last work session. So this is a board policy. We want to make sure this is a policy the board is comfortable with so that we don't have a lot of challenges or appeals. Just real quickly looking back through what we've included in here, the average cost for these reviews, if you take the ones that are in this report, is about $3,000. I think that's probably more than what we would want to be on the hook for. But if the board would want to set a threshold, like say any review that exceeds $2,500, anything over that dollar amount is on you. Anything, because I hate to say 10 hours because some hours cost different than other hours depending on who's doing it. So if you would want to set a dollar threshold, we know what our permit fees are. We know what that dollar threshold is, and as long as they can get their stuff done underneath that dollar threshold, they know they're good. But when it exceeds it, then staff can say, you've exceeded your, say, $2,500 or whatever it is. From now on, this cash register is ringing at your expense. So I think that might be something to consider.
Sounds a lot like what a Commissioner Shifty, but on a different.
But just a dollar amount instead of an hourly amount. That way,
it's actually more hours, so that's better.
Yeah, depends on who's looking at it on the hourly.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just the average.
I don't have
cost
any engineers charge less than 100, so his is better.
Yeah.
So to keep things rolling, can I hear a motion? And we can continue the discussion if you want after we have something really to consider.
I can't hear the motion.
There hasn't been one yet.
We were hoping you were going to make one.
Okay, I'll move that the Board of County Commissioners approve Resolution 2020-46, adoption of the development fee and amendments to the planning and zoning fee schedule.
And is that what the amendment that was proposed for the $2,500?
Sure.
Okay. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor and a second. Is there discussion? I'll start with Commissioner Culberson.
Well, for point of clarification, the bill is, to be transparent, the amount of hours billed and what the contractor Olson is going to end up charging is going to be readily available to the developer, right? I mean, they're not going to say this is a dollar amount you owe. So I'm sure that's going to be not going to be an issue. They're going to see what the breakdown is of what Olson's charging for. And then secondly, if Olson's going to be to a point where it's a nickel holding up a dollar situation, our staff is there for the developer more so than for Olson. So, Bill and his staff are going to say, hey, this is not basically what Olson's hanging up. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. As far as the motion, are we sure we want to put a $2,500 limit on it? Because I know we used an average of the cases at hand, but I'm not sure that's a good idea. I'm not opposed to the motion. I'm just thinking the $2,500 might be an arbitrary figure.
Well, I was going to say, if I was going to make any recommendation, maybe say if the average was $3,000, we set a threshold at $3,000. Again, there's no fee that's ever going to cover our cost based on the type of development or complexity of it. So we're going to have to set again, not to exceed. So our costs are not going to exceed externally, say $3,000 if that's been our average. So that would be the only change I would make to the motion that Vicki made.
You would want it to be 3,000?
That's been our average.
Is that okay, Commissioner Cos, to modify the motion?
I would rather keep it at $2,500.
Is that okay?
Well, I think we're just telling the development community that's an increase of $500 for every project they've been used to.
What does Bill think?
Bill, what do you say?
I think we're talking about $500. And so,
what was that dollar?
Okay,
honestly, I think that.
Well, let me be more specific. What do you think about putting a dollar limit on it?
I think a dollar limit's easy enough to track because they provide. If you put it at $2,500 or $3,000, they provide itemized bills that define what hours they're billing towards which projects, and so. Whether that limit is $2,500 or $3,000, I think that some of the most recent one, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think some of these more recent subdivisions have come in at under around the $22,000 range on the reviews, but I'm not sure if all of that process has been completed. So I think that for the most part. You can get through a couple sets of reviews. Your initial review, probably your secondary review, with the $2,500 allocation.
Joe, what do you think about that?
Joe's going back to the room now. Is it?
Is he still there? Okay. Just nod.
Just setting a flat limit of like $2,500 or $3,000.
Yeah, I think that's just a compromise. As they get said, they're going to look at it every year. And we have to adjust policy and see how it works.
Can you guys hear that on the phone?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Do we want to modify that motion, or do you want to leave it at $2,500?
I think it was Commissioner Cos's motion, so.
Commissioner Cos, I'm going to.
I would just like to go ahead and move forward with the $2,500 motion.
Okay, further discussion? Okay, no further discussion. Commissioner Culberson, call for a vote.
Aye.
Commissioner Cos.
Aye.
Mr. Shimke.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. So, Okay, looking at this agenda and looking at our time, what can we push it forward? I mean, we have some people on. What do we need to do so we can get to this work session and then come back?
Well, you've got like 20 minutes before the work session.
I think we could.
I would hope that the next two items, they're tied together, that you could knock those out in 20 minutes. I would suggest you just continue to follow the agenda.
Okay, because we have some folks here from the retainage, right?
You also have folks here about the next two items. So.
All right. Well, we're just trying to make it as quick as we can, I guess. Here we go.
That would be great.
Motion to approve a temporary special use permit for King's Construction.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is a request for temporary special use permit for a clean, it is not a clean rubble private landfill. I'm really sorry. That is not true. It is temporary special use permit for a
borough crushing
borough
storage area.
Crushing. Yes, they've had 2 temporary special use permits this year, and I pulled the wrong permit, so I'm going to do this off of memory. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. Yes, so this is located right on the Eisenhower project. As you're all aware, this is necessary in order for the Eisenhower Road project to proceed. King's Construction anticipates this is going to take place over roughly the next year. It will run in congruence with vast majority of the road project. They need to burrow dirt from the site. Again, this is for the road project. They also would crush asphalt and then millings and such, and that would be, if any of those were to be sold, it would be sold through King's Construction. They would be the only ones who would be hauling it off site. They won't have anyone coming to the site or anything like that. The location that they have, again, is directly on the road project, which is certainly convenient. It also is a rather large parcel. Certainly, I know that there is a subdivision to the east of there. I know we've had some concerns from that, but this is a road project that is directly going to benefit the folks in that subdivision. I understand it may be an inconvenience for a period of time, but again, it is necessary to complete this project. It would not make very much sense to move the borough site away from Eisenhower, as then we would be disrupting another part of the county that was not directly being impacted or directly benefited from the Eisenhower project. We recommend approval of this. We'll answer any questions that you may have.
I will add one additional comment to Crystal's comments. Is in conjunction with the Eisenhower project, this site have not supplied us proctor testing of the soil material that is currently there. So subject to that, passing of that material for the specifications of the Eisenhower project, there could be a subsequent application if that material was to fail.
Commissioner Steele, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, you're recognized.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve temporary special use permit for King's Construction for the borough crushing storage area in Eisenhower Road, contingent on the proctor study.
Commissioner Culberson has made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a discussion? Hearing no discussion, call for the vote. Commissioner Culberson.
Aye.
Commissioner Cause.
Aye.
Mr. Shimke.
Aye.
And Chairman votes aye. And next.
Okay. The next item for your consideration today on the agenda is the contract for the Eisenhower Road Improvement Project. These bids were previously accepted by the county, albeit there was open discussion regarding specifically the stoplight proposal bid alternate item, 20th Street and Eisenhower Road. Before you today is the consideration of that contract. I do not know that we have received, to my knowledge, any correspondence. I do know that the city administrator from the city of Leavenworth is present here today, and I don't know if that's to facilitate this conversation or subsequent conversations, but the contract base bid is $5,883,421. We did put in a 5% contingency, albeit should not be fully necessary throughout the course of the project, but for unforeseen or added items that may come as a part of this project, with the total requested amount of $6,178,421. This project, in order to keep it on track for the construction schedule and the construction window provided by the bid documents, we do need to move forward with this here today, if at all possible. And the project has an anticipated start date, if this contract is approved, of the 29th or the 30th of this month, the Monday after Thanksgiving weekend. The contract is written for the Chairman Smith to sign. I would ask today that you authorize myself to sign the contract, or Commissioner Stevens, since he is acting chair today, in order to move this project along and allow us to issue the notice to proceed.
With that, I'll recognize Commissioner Cause.
Yes, I would like to revisit just momentarily and hear the issue of the alternate number 2. And if he is prepared, I would like to hear from the city administrator of Leavenworth.
Is there objection of the commissioners? Then we'll recognize the administrator, Kramer. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I am here for both this meeting and the next one, so I will be here for a while. I'll be brief because I also want this meeting to start on time at 11:30. I appreciate the work the county has done on this, the county staff moving this forward. The project is almost here. Very briefly, the last time I approached the county commission was on August 12th. At that meeting, my request was that the alternate related to the stop sign be added to the base bid. There was some back and forth between myself and the commission about, at that point, about there not being a big difference between the base bid and the alternate. If the bids came in low, it would be added. That's the impression that I left that meeting with, that we were going to add. If the bids came in well below the engineer's estimate, I'm happy to see that the bids did come in about $1 million below the engineer's estimate, give or take. I haven't seen the final numbers. And so I'm here today to make one final plea to the county commission to add the full cost of the traffic signal to the base bid of the project, have that project go forward with the stoplight included, and then at the end of the project, of course, the city would take over maintenance of the roadway, the signal, and the entire length of the project. So that's what I'm here to ask you one last time to please reconsider that request from the city of Leavenworth.
I have a traffic study sitting on my desk in there that the engineer says there's not a need for a light there. How do you respond to that?
So the last traffic study that I had, and I don't want to again rehash my arguments from the last time, was that on what's called a reduced speed warrant, which is appropriate for certain design speeds, that it does meet traffic signal warrants. I would also point out that the MOU between the city, the county, and the city of Lansing does not mention traffic signal warrants. It uses the terms necessary and appropriate. I think it's fair to use something like a traffic signal warrant to find something necessary and appropriate, but it's certainly not any kind of requirement. But so first I would say that from the information that we last had from Wilson Company, when they did that, it did meet based on reduced signal warrants, but then also that was the spirit of the agreement and are still our request today.
So if you were, the decision we made earlier was that we would pay for half, but that traffic study, if it's saying that there's not a need for a light there, is that not a waste of taxpayers' dollars?
I don't believe it is at all. I think that a traffic signal warrant is something that an entity like the federal government or the state uses to do that kind of stuff. A city or a county has the ability to do whatever they think is best for their community. I think with the residential development out there, with the impending business development out there, that a light is the expectation when you approach an intersection at those types of speeds, and that to not put it there would not be the best practice, regardless of what you are looking at. But I still believe that it does meet those warrants. But
I think if we start having conversations about cities or counties and whether or not tax dollars are being spent wisely, we're going to be here. We'll never start the 11:30.
obviously. But Bill, the traffic study said, well, it gave a number of years, didn't it?
No, it did not give a number of years.
It did not.
Gave an amount of development in order to, and Mr. Kramer here did state, it is to meet those federal warrants that are outlined within the AASHTO Green Book for traffic signal requirements. And so it was a number of developments. I believe I don't have that document here before me, but I believe it was development of the industrial park and commercial area and 176 residential homes. And so that was the threshold at which the traffic generated along that intersection would meet the federal warrants of the AASHTO Green Book. But
so if we're doing a cost, I mean, the other issue is that why not do a cost share between the county and the city?
I think that was discussed when we had the memorandum of understanding signed by all three governing bodies. We hashed that out at that point, that the county would assume the initial cost, the capital cost of the entire project, and then maintenance costs till the end of time would be turned over to the city. So we did discuss that, and we came to a signed MOU that outlines that.
Mr. Lawfrey, is that your understanding?
Well, I think there was a lot of discussion at that time. Obviously, that was before my time at the county. I don't know that the MOU specifically calls out a traffic light. It calls out signalization. However, I do agree with Mr. Kramer that the last time he was here, there was conversation about if the project came in significantly under what we had budgeted, that there would be consideration given for the county to pay for that light. And I do think we came in $1.1 million under what we originally estimated, even if you pay for the full amount of the light. So the board has already made a decision, but I do think that there was an indication given that we would consider that. I don't know that it's part of any legal agreement, though.
Okay, I'll go around the horn. Commissioner Culberson.
Well, only one question I keeps popping up is Paul keeps saying that the maintenance of the light and the road and the intersection.
We can't hear you real well there, Jeff.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. So, like Paul mentioned, the city will maintain it from that point forward after it's put in, but is there an option the city not maintain it since it's in the city limits? I mean, it keeps getting brought up that the city will maintain it from now on, but it's all in the city limits. So wouldn't they have to maintain it from this point on?
It was more that we are assuming responsibility actually outside the city limits for, if you look at the project as a whole, both the trail or the sidewalk, the roadway, the entire project. So you are correct that we would maintain that signal, but it's based on the MOU. We're accepting responsibility for the whole project, and we don't look at this as a project with a signal. We looked at the signal as part of the entire project. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I see. And then the other question I have was, it's not on alternate 2, but the sidewalk alternative, that's not on the table, right? City of Lansing said they don't want the sidewalk. Is that correct?
That's
correct.
That's the signal we're getting from the city administrator. That's correct, Jeff.
Okay.
Commissioner Cobbs, I'll recognize you.
Okay, I expressed at the last meeting that we discussed this project that I fully support the county paying for the traffic signal. And I would also point out, when discussing traffic counts, the county has millions of dollars in roadways recently that did not meet the criteria of traffic count.
Okay, Commissioner Shimke.
So, Bill, I was going to ask, specific to this contract, I was going to bring up the stoplight. I think there's been a lot more conversation, and I agree, Paul, that was my understanding for the last time you were here. I think there's been additional dialogue internally and also potential, legal fees and costs, and that's not something anybody, I think, wants to incur either. I think there's been enough legal fees between all the governments in 2020. So I don't know if we want to readdress that during this contract piece or if that can be a follow-up to, as far as revisiting whether or not we would cost share or fully fund. And then also I wanted to understand from a penalty perspective, I've obviously been pretty rigid about that since joining, that holding contractors accountable to delivering projects, not only at scope, but on time. And I know you feel the same way. So I just wanted to make sure that that was all addressed.
Yeah, that's addressed. And so in that, there is a penalty clause for late completion within this project. And I think it would be appropriate if the board, whatever the board determines, I don't think that we can move forward with a half funding mechanism. You'd have to approve the base bid today and then later subsequently come back and rediscuss this topic another time if you wanted to continue down the path of asking the city to fund half of that cost. If you do decide, we would just amend the contract amount to include that alternate item for the stoplight, and then if the board feels appropriate and Mr. Van Paris doesn't have any issue with it, you could designate me as the signature since Commissioner Smith is not present here today. I'll make those adjustments.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Mr. Knoll's outline of possible action is appropriate. You can authorize him to sign. You can also authorize the addition of the option.
So I think I would make a motion to approve the contract and allowing Bill to sign for the chairman as presented, but then would also request that we bring in an agreement, an opportunity to discuss and approve alternate 2 being partially or fully funded and having that conversation. Whether that's next week or 2 weeks or whatever that ultimately needs to be.
Can you keep those two separate, please, just so we have a clear motion on this item and then the second motion for the bringing of...
Motion to approve the Eisenhower project in an amount as presented, in an amount not to exceed $6,178,421.55.
And
authorize Bill Knoll to sign for the chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor and a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, I'll take the vote. Commissioner Culberson?
Aye.
Mr. Cause?
Nay.
Mr. Shimke?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye.
And then as a follow-up, if we could bring alternate 2 back to the board for consideration for fully funded or partial funded.
We currently are partially funding it, so you'd want to bring it back for consideration of fully funding it, correct?
One, if there's any technical agreement, I think a motion was made, but we've not entered into anything, obviously, with the other parties, either the city or the contractor. So if that means just an agreement for a fully funded option as an alternate to our previous decision.
You just want to bring it back for discussion.
We could just bring the alternate back for your consideration, and at that time you can discuss if you're going to fund it or not. I think what Bill's point is that if you're not fully funding it, or if we don't have an agreement in place from the city to partially fund it, then there is no alternate. Right. So that's what we're trying to get clarified. The project is being built and designed. It was designed and will be built to accept a traffic signal at that location, regardless of whether we accept the alternate or not. So this allows this project to go forward while you're contemplating this other item.
And we would have an accepted contract for the project. I would want to note this, and I have discussed this with King's Construction, if this was your course of action where the light add alternate item was discussed at a later date, how long they would hold that pricing for. And so that's also because after you enter into a contract on an item, on a project, subsequently they could address that as a change order where they would then try to renegotiate that pricing. They said they would not do that at this time, but I wanted to make sure the board was aware of that entering into a contract agreement here today. Because once you enter this agreement, that price is no longer guaranteed. And so it would be considered a change or an added item after the initial contract. From my understanding, if I'm not mistaken. Is that accurate?
It would be a change order at that point.
And so at that point, the price could change for the item. And so you may want to consider that today as a part of your discussion, because moving forward, that number could be a moving target, and you've already selected your contractor for the project. So they would be in the position of already securing the project under this contract.
If it changed significantly, though, you could just bid it
I was going to
on
say,
it
that's
as a standalone. If you
put it
had
out to
to.
bid, right?
Yeah, so if
They
it
don't
changed
accept it.
significantly.
So could you restate your motion then? Your motion is
The last one or the first one?
Yeah, whichever one. The first one.
This one for the alternate.
Yeah. Oh, just for the alternate.
Yeah. We've already voted and approved the contract,
I
so now
just
we're
wanna
on to,
revisit
now it's just
it in a
the
couple weeks or
alternate.
whatever.
Yep.
Right, so I would request that a proposal be brought to the board for fully funding alternate 2 as a part of the Eisenhower project.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Culbertson, second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion? And recognize
Thank
County
you,
Councilor.
Mr. Chair. Commissioner Shimke, for clarification, are you requesting a proposal different from the option 2 that's being presented this morning?
David, I ran out of coffee about an hour
I don't
ago,
think
so I'm
that's
not
a-
exactly sure.
It's just the alternate for
It's
the
just going to
traffic.
bring it back,
Bring
right?
it back
We'll
for
review it
consideration.
and make a decision.
Yeah. That's all we're going to do.
And we have pricing with the current contractor that may or may not honor it. So,
Okay.
understood.
Now I'll go, Commissioner Culbertson, did you have more to say?
No, I just want to make sure what we're talking about is bringing the alternate 2 back to discussion to see whether we're going to pay for it or not.
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Cause.
Yeah, I would like to have it brought back next week.
If if Commissioner Smith's not available next week, you still want it brought back?
If Commissioner Smith is not healthy enough to participate in that meeting, I would say the following week, please.
Okay.
No more than 2 weeks from today's date.
You want to just do it the week after Thanksgiving?
That's fine.
Okay. Commissioner Shimke, anything else?
No.
Okay, call for the vote. Commissioner Culbertson.
Aye.
Commissioner Cause.
Aye.
Commissioner Shimke.
Aye.
And Chairman votes aye. Okay.
So we got 3 more. Do we want to recess for the work session?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 more, I think.
So, how long do you think the work session will take? How long do you?
Well, I think you could start with an hour, but if you just recess to the work session, and then we'll come back to a regular meeting at the end of our work session.
Okay, we'll recess till 12:30 for the work session, and then following the work session, we'll come back to our regular business.
So we got.
Okay, we'll call us back into session here, and we'll recognize Bill Knoll.
Well, I know that we are on
Retainage.
F, right?
F, yes, sir.
So, do we have McEnany representatives and Mark Brewer on the phone at this time? Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yes, Mark is here. Eric Bozeman.
Okay. All right. Let me just take a quick drink. All right. So, today before you, what you have for your consideration is the release of the 10% retainage for the dust abatement Group 2 contract. The Group 2 contract was extended through Groups 2, 4, 5, and 7. And so it is in a total amount of $542,572.94. I don't know if all the members of the board have had the opportunity to review
the analysis that was emailed to you. I can go through that analysis in full or in
just
part.
very briefly.
Very briefly. Well, it's not that long, so we'll just go through it. For McEnany and Schlegel's representatives. The county understood that the design of the dust abatement projects did not include full geotechnical evaluation and pavement section recommendations. In part, this is because without geometric improvements, where cutting of the roadway would be necessary. The roadway improvements did not get below the existing gravel road base. The gravel roadways that were being hard surfaced did not have any visual signs of base failures, and McEnany did not report any areas of concern where their cement-treated base preparation was below the existing gravel road bed. Mr. Lujan, Public Works Director at the time, of July 2018, provided Schlegel an example project that was with a desired scope of services from Platte County, Missouri. The intention of these documents appears to be to demonstrate the possible language that exempted the design engineer from liability from the county for not completing a plan set to AASHTO design standards for the geometric improvements of highways. These improvements were to be considered an enhancement to the roadway and do not discuss potential construction quality issues. In response to contractor requests, Mr. Brewer with Schlegel asked if the county would accept BM2 and BM2B mix designs as well as the originally specified KDOT super pave mixes. On March 21st, 2019, Mike Spickelmeyer approved the use of BM2 and BM2B mixes. The approval of these mixes did not include the approval of any deviations from the KDOT standard specifications. Section 2.0 materials, Part B, reclaimed asphalt pavement. BM2 mix, this is quoted from the mix design standards. BM2 mixture may contain up to 10% RAP, provided the engineer approves the RAP source. Exceeding 10% RAP in the BM2 mixture or including RAP and other mixtures within these specifications is only permitted when stated in the contract documents. The contract documents do not allow for more than the 10% specified material, and there are no emails that have been identified at this time where previous county staff or current county staff approved a change in the RAP specifications. In April 28, 2020, there was submittals provided from McEnany Construction to Schlegel for their asphalt. These submittals were not provided to county staff or Olson during their review or approval. Their submittal included a 30% RAP for recycled material. On April 29th, 2020, the asphalt submittal was not approved initially by Schlegel, and then several hours later, during that same day, an email was sent with approval of the mix design. County staff does not have any recollection that has been provided to myself regarding conversations that may have been had, and no email records have been provided or found internally regarding that initial denial and then subsequent approval. The construction inspection services were not contracted to the level that should be considered construction engineering. The site inspector was not required to be a KDOT certified inspector. Despite this, the inspector was the witness to the areas that had to be proof rolled for base compaction and was witness to the construction process. He did not bring forward concerns regarding the existing roadways base that was being treated with cement and past the proof roll areas. The county should be assured that the cement-treated base should perform as expected. Also, the base compaction was tested throughout the process by Terracon. It is county staff's opinion that the base failures that are being found should not be occurring after the stabilization of the pre-existing gravel roadbed. The construction product has been requested that the county accept has unacceptable deficiencies. In order for these deficiencies to be the result of unforeseen underlying conditions, as have been stated by the contractor, the underlying subgrade would have to have enough tension force to create a deflective crack through 9 inches of cement-treated base and 4 inches of asphalt material within 12 weeks of construction. The The third part, let me get to this section. As the director, I do not have the authority to approve partial release of the retainage. The contract states, from the amount so ascertained, there shall be deducted 10% to be retained until after completion of the entire work to the satisfaction of the engineer and owner. In addition to the deficiencies in the base noted, the different groups that had cracking had been repaired with the exception of Group 7. Group 7 has only been crack sealed, and the replacement of the asphalt section to the cracks was not completed. As a board, you have the authority, obviously, to approve deviations from the contract language to a lesser retainage if so desired. It is my conclusion that because of the noted history of cracking, which was the equivalent of 1.7% of the total project prior to any freeze-thaw cycles in the deficiencies or questions regarding RAP in the construction product. At this time, I will be recommending denial of the request for releasing the retainage, and that is the conclusion of the analysis that I'm going to provide here today. At that, I will turn it over to the board for discussion. Obviously, the contractor and representatives of Schlegel are available for the conversation. I think that from the information that I've received from pavement engineers with our consulting firm and from others within the industry, 30% RAP material in general makes the asphalt brittle, and when you see flexing of the material or any deflection in the base, you're going to see cracking. And so with that, I will open the conversation and turn it over.
Okay. Before we do that, who could you, you folks that are on the phone, could you identify yourself with your name so I know who all's on the phone?
Yes, this is Eric Bozeman, president of Mackay Construction.
Eric, so it's Eric?
Yes.
Okay, and then Schlegel?
Mark Brewer, principal with Schlegel.
Mark Brewer, okay. Is it anyone else? Okay. Do the commissioners have questions? And I'll start with Commissioner Culberson.
I don't have any questions. I'm just interested to hear what they've got to say.
Okay. Commissioner Cause?
Not at this moment, but I may in just a few minutes.
Okay. Commissioner Shimke?
Bill, I was just going to confirm, so through that analysis, the material type was different than expected, or it was different than the agreement or what was initially proposed. Is that correct? When you say a 30% mix, obviously I don't know all the terminology like you do, but
so in the plan specifications, the plans called for an SR 12.5 KDOT super pave mix or a BM2 BM2B type mix, which is your older asphalt standards. And so within the KDOT specifications, your RAP or your recycled material, your old asphalt material, is limited in a BM mix to 10%.
10%.
And the
okay.
new super pave mixes, you can go up to 25%, but they require the addition of additional oils and additives, I believe, not mistaken. And so there are different parameters for these super pave mixes that allow for a higher use of recycled material.
Okay, I'll just recognize Eric briefly to give your perspective on this.
Well, I guess there's a few different topics. The asphalt content, we submitted a mix design through the engineer to the county with the 30% recycle. I will tell you that that is a very common mix design used all over the metro, and that mix design was approved, and that's the mix design we used on your project. That being said, the cracks that are, I think it's less than 1% on the project, they're showing signs from developing below the cement-treated subgrade. So whether or not the the asphalt wrap content had anything to do with it. It seems that rather the crack is coming from below, so the asphalt wrap content is kind of irrelevant to the conversation. That being said, we have been very cooperative with the county in trying to resolve these issues. We have patched all the cracks on groups 2, 4, and 5. We stopped on group 7 after we discovered, I have some photos and videos we can show in the future, that it appeared the cracks were going down well below our subgrade. We crack sealed them to protect them as we're going into inclement weather. And we want to resolve this issue with the county. My only perspective is retaining an entire $540,000 on a project that has a maintenance bond provision that you guys have in hand to protect yourselves from any other failures, I think is above and beyond what I should be asked to do. I did propose to Bill, Mr. Knoll, last week to keep the retainage on Group 7 since we didn't patch those areas while we monitor and resolve what could cause these cracks.
A question for Bill. Have we had cracking in any of our other phased project roads?
There has been some cracking, but not substantial cracking such as these, and not along the wheel path out into the road. It's a different type of cracking that has occurred here, much more substantial and much longer in length.
So, in your opinion, is it the substrata or is it the material?
I think it's probably a combination, but the material with that high of a wrap content is going to become brittle and crack more easily than one that would have had a 10% recycled material mixture.
Okay. Could I interject there? Excuse me.
Yes.
Bill, you told me on the phone a couple weeks ago that you weren't a materials engineer and you would not be making any opinions on materials, yet you're saying that the material is brittle. I do not believe that to be true.
I think that's a valid point, and I think that's why our recommendation is that before any retainage would be released, that a full analysis be done to determine exactly what is causing those failures, and that we would be more than happy to engage a firm to do that, but we think it should be at the expense of the contractor since they have failed to provide us with a acceptable product.
Bill, what was the total mileage of work that McEnany completed?
I believe it's 22.5 approximately miles.
And so I keep hearing the 1.7 type percent scenario. So I guess my other question on the 22.5 miles would be, how much of the 22.5 miles are we confident in or meets expectations? Is it really 98.3%?
Well, we're seeing failures in that 1.7%, but that was prior to any freeze-thaw cycles. Generally, I would hope that at the time of the completion, we wouldn't have the type of cracking that we would have historically. I mean, you're familiar with the roadways in your area,
right?
And you've seen where they've crack sealed. And if you were a private landowner and purchased a driveway, would you be? What would the opinion be of that material after the 12 weeks?
Right, no, understood. So of all the roadways, though, the 22.5 miles, are there roadways or groups that we're not seeing any deficiencies? While we might be making assumptions based on what we've seen in other areas, are there groups that don't seem to have any deficiencies at this time?
There are roadways that don't have the same type of deficiencies, but from all indications, the same type of material was used on all of the roadways. And so whether that is a base issue or another issue, that would be something that would be determined by a study that could be done, an analysis of the project.
So, Mr. Brewer, are you on the line now?
I am, yeah.
Would you like to make some comments?
Sure. I guess I'd like to maybe go back and start to the beginning of where this project started and how we got to where we're at. To be quite frank, I'm a little taken aback by Mr. Knoll's comments about representations made by our firm. Mr. Knoll, I believe, is Public Works Director, or in his capacity, about number 4 or 5 since this project started. And so I'm not surprised that there's a poor amount of record keeping at the county, or certainly on our end for the appropriate approvals for this mixed design, if that truly is the case. But rest assured, I'm going to, in light of this information, research that a little further, because it has been a pretty collaborative effort over the past several years on this project, between the contractor, our firm, and the county. You may recall that we were not contracted to provide utility coordination for these projects, even though we recommended it. And then that caused a delay of 1 year in many of these roadway projects. I believe McEnany worked with the county and I think held over their 2019 rates. Just as an example of some of the collaborative effort that we've been through. So I guess it's unfortunate that we've gotten to this point in the process. But I really, like I said, taken aback a little bit about kind of the right turn this has taken. I think the time to review the pavement quality is not at the time we've dumped out 60,000 tons of asphalt. It's likely in the first week or two of paving when we're doing 22 miles. And so I believe county staff was involved with certainly starting this project. When we started on Group 7, they were certainly involved with the punch list of Group 7. And I know the project moved relatively quickly, but over one summer. But
well, it certainly looks like there's a lot of cracking in the pictures I've seen. Mr. Knoll?
I would state that, to Mr. Brewer's point, that the material that went down, and at the time of like our walkthroughs for the different groups, until we got to near the end of the project where they were cracking prior to the final punch list walkthrough, where we were providing punch list items to McEnany Construction. For instance, Group 7, we did a walkthrough to that group and did a visual inspection of the roadway at the time. And at the time of its completion, there weren't any cracking. And we were willing at that time, as a staff, to allow the contractor to close out groups as they went along, if they completed the punch list items. And for Group 7, I believe the punch list was mostly just some driveway tie-ins and a little concrete that needed to be removed near a bridge rail. And so the issue at hand was that those repairs, McEnany chose to do those repairs at the end of all groups. And by the time we went back to Group 7, 3 or 4 months later, substantial cracking had started to occur in several locations coming off of K5 and up on McPherson. And so consequently, we never entered into that bonding period on any groups because the punch list hadn't been completed, and at the time that we went back to do the inspection, the cracking had started to occur. So immediately upon and during the process of the construction, things appeared to be normal and adequate, but after a couple months of traffic, issues started to develop in different areas.
Okay, Mr. Brewer,
so I will add
more comments?
If I may. So I guess to where I started on this, my point is that we provided, and just, I'm obviously a consultant for the county, so I want to make sure the county is aware of some potential risk that I see with moving forward, and what I think the direction is that if we're going to tell a contractor that his asphalt is, not to the criteria we want, and that these cracks are the result of his poor construction methods, the county has to be prepared for what happens if that's not the case. If a third party goes out and determines that these cracks are caused by underlying conditions that the county did not make the contractor aware of prior to selecting them for the contract, there's a potential that could come back on the county. So just putting that out there as you consider the options here, if it's found and determined by a third party that, we take some samples and, hey, by the way, the asphalt's fine and this cracking that goes down, 2, 3, 4 feet is a result of just differing site conditions. Based on my experience, that has a tendency to be an owner responsibility. And so just the way this project was presented to the contractors when we started the process back in 2017, 2018, I know a lot of public works staff wasn't here at that time, and certainly some of the commissioners, but it was a paved-in-place project that the county accepts deficiencies with the existing roadbed condition, and asked Schlegel to prepare a deficiency review of signage. We were provided the pavement section from the get-go. It met the county's dust abatement criteria at that time. That was a chip seal roadway. We worked with McEnany to develop this cement-treated subgrade and 4-inch section, and we brought that in front of the board for approval prior to doing so in lieu of a standard 6-inch asphalt section. That resulted in the savings of about $1.4 million for the county. Notwithstanding these perceived, construction issues, but so it's important, I guess, that we understand some of the background of it and what the county has presented to the contractor, because this is not, 178th Street or 182nd Street where, around Evans Road, to where we've selected a true design consultant to fully investigate the conditions, do full geometric improvements, regrade the entire roadbed, provide fully stabilized shoulders and graded shoulders, and then provide the contractor a complete set of design and construction documents with all the background information that they use and understand that risk and construct the project. This was a pave in place where there's many situations where there's one-to-one or even steeper drop-offs right at the edge of pavement. There's areas of poor drainage. All these things were known deficiencies when this was sold by the county to the contractor. And so, to me, I just want to make sure everyone understands how we got here, and that if some of these situations come back to be the cause of some of these cracks, I mean, there's some exposure there for the county, in my opinion, and others may see it differently, but I'm just trying to make sure I represent the county as best I can, even though that may not be the same path as apparently now the public works director or construction superintendent. But that's all I wanted to add.
Mark, this is Commissioner Shimke. Just a quick question or point of clarification. So, as a consultant for the county, don't you think it's in our best interest, regardless of surface material or the construction work that's done or potential failure of these roadways, that we understand exactly what the problem is? Because there's one thing that's clear, I think, across everybody, is that there's unexpected deficiencies that have occurred before a winter cycle, in which case then you're starting to make assumptions how many more could occur or how much worse it could get. But ultimately, it could be a number of variables. I think everybody's agreed, but before we can make a rational decision, you kind of want to have all of the data, right? I mean, wouldn't you agree that that's
absolutely
the best course of action is to figure out?
We've offered to do that for the county using our subconsultant Terracon, obviously, and told the county they're welcome, obviously, to do that themselves. But agreed, we made that recommendation. And I think Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the time we made that originally, it didn't seem like we could have those results back in time to meet this paving window, and so the direction was given to make the repairs. The direction was given to go ahead and have McEnany make these patches as we've identified as the repair using the best information we had at that time, and so McEnany's made those repairs.
I don't
on all but Group 7.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. Mark put together, made that offer, but that offer could not, the analysis of the pavement It should probably be done by a third-party consultant.
I agree it needs to be with a third party, and I think that the county should be able to select that party.
Yes, and my recommendation here today is based upon the fact that we don't know what some of these failures are. We've given the full analysis. The full analysis includes the question of the surface material. There are questions regarding the base and whether it is possible that cracking could deflect through 9 inches of treated base and 4 inches of asphalt in a 3-month time period or a 30-day time period in some cases. And so these questions, for me to be comfortable to make a recommendation other than I've made today to release the retainage and close the project out and go into a bonding system, without any of that information, it's not to create an adversarial relationship or try to make an example of any one thing. It's because the information is not necessary and to protect the interest of the taxpayers of Leavenworth County.
I have a question for Mark.
Which Mark?
You, not Mark Brewer, Mark Lawfrey. Sorry. If we do nothing and we just go with the staff recommendation, then we just wait until they come back with a report. Is that what would happen? Or do we need to take an action?
I think we need to take an action to get the testing done by a third party firm.
I just wondered if that was something that could be handled in-house, or do we need a motion?
So this is a motion, I guess, for Eric, but is there a scenario where part of the reason this hasn't, who would pay for this disinterested third party? So one, is it going to be a disinterested? It seems there's support for that. And then two, who's going to pay for it? I don't know how these scenarios typically work. I'm trying to be too creative, but it would seem the study needs to be completed. There's a retainer in question. Results, almost the results to me would identify who that expense should be in all seriousness. Meaning, if it's an issue where it was the way, then that should be at our expense. An issue with the surface work that was done, I would think that would be at the contractor. I don't know what that expense is, or if we can or something like that. But the results, in my mind, tell us we're responsible party for that expense, and then ultimately the results are we've got to work mutual resolution.
If I may, we don't want to work with the county. We want to work with Schlegel or whoever the third party is. I mean, we're not running away from anything. Why we're here today is because of the $540,000 that's being held while we still have a bond on the project. And we, at this point, there's only 530 feet of cracking that has not repaired over 22.1 miles. So we would be happy to engage some sort of an agreement with the county to evaluate this. I will bring up, just from a construction standard,
I don't think that it would take that long to get a firm in place to do the testing and make a determination.
So is there a scenario, Bill, where there's certain groups or miles of roadway where we don't have the same concerns, and as a percentage could be released? I mean, again, we don't
know what those concerns are until the analysis is complete.
So we're going to test every.
The analysis comes back that there's an asphalt failure. You're looking at, and you're going to take these samples from all over these roadways, and that's where my concern comes from. And the board can take whatever action they feel is appropriate here today. But there are roads that don't have substantial cracking, and then there are some in the immediate vicinity that you would expect to have the same type sub-base material that do have substantial cracking, like from an intersection going two different directions. And so,
but Bill, what you said was 1.7%. It would make the assumption that 98% of it's fine.
I would.
I mean,
is that you, Eric? Can you identify yourself before you talk?
Oh, I apologize.
And so, and one of the questions that was raised by one of the commissioners was, maybe it was Mr. Van Paris. So if you're looking at 1.7%, and the county had to incur the cost, say McEnany, now they have stood behind it, and I commend them for that, and I'm not here to try to step on the fact that they did go to 3 of the groups and do the repairs. And so one of the questions was, if the cracking continues to occur, or the testing result comes back that the asphalt material was some sort of an issue, at that point, would you as a board feel it appropriate to pay 100% of the cost of that material? And so without that testing in place and without that determination made, you don't have the ability to make that type of analysis. And so I think that the appropriate path is to get that answer. It's just what the board's direction is with that retainage.
Well, I don't disagree with you, Bill. I think everybody's in the opinion that we want to have the answer, and then ultimately the results of that testing will tell us what remediation needs to occur. I totally get Eric's point of, if the majority of the projects aren't showing failure, why is the majority of the retainage being kept? And I would argue that if it is the worst case scenario, like you have to, that's part of your job is to plan for the worst case scenario. The retainage isn't going to fix it. So whether it's a partial return or not, when you're talking about 22.5 miles of potential risk versus the 1.7 miles that have been identified, that's probably not going to solve the problem. If again, going force majeure, worst case scenario. So
it's not going to solve it.
Correct. So my point, that not to make it for Eric would be, if the majority of the roadways we haven't experienced those failures, while we may have some concerns or assumptions, are we not in a position to release even, some retainage, knowing that the tests are going to be occurred and we're not recognizing this as a finished, final, approved sign-off until those tests are back? It's kind of a contingency, right? This third party is going to go validate all these assumptions that we're having. So I'm agreeing with you. I'm understanding the point that Mr. Bosman's making as to what we've seen versus the total scope of the project versus the retainage. And I just make the argument, if it is the worst case scenario, then the retainage, all or partial, isn't going to solve the issue.
So staff is recommending that we keep the retainage. So what would be the appropriate motion?
I think what we're recommending is we keep the retainage until we know why there's a failure. Not for anything other than that right now, because they're right. The failure could be pre-existing conditions that would then not be on the contractor, but they could also be that it was poor prep or poor product. We don't know, and I just think that the testing has to be completed. That's why we're recommending holding the retainage. As Bill read the line from the contract, the retainage is there until we accept the product. By releasing the retainage, we are in fact then saying we're accepting your product, that it's a finished product and it's good.
Which could then include liability?
We aren't saying that. We're saying that it's not a finished product right now. Now, if we can identify why it failed and it's pre-existing conditions, then I think it puts it on the county to accept the project. But until that, we know, I think it's premature to release the retainage.
So the motion would be that we have Bill report back to us, but at this time I
think the direction would be to complete the necessary studies to identify the failures and to then, as a board, direct us on how that's paid for.
Okay, and you'll report back to us what the time frame of that will be in the near future.
Yes, I can send out a report. We have reached out to a couple of different third-party firms that would be completely disinterested in the outcome of the results, and so at this time we just need to engage one of those firms and ask for a time frame It is a professional service. It's not something you would necessarily need to bid. We have received pricing from Olson of what they would charge. I would not suggest that we use them in this instance, but I wanted to use that as a baseline to determine appropriate pricing. And so we did that, but it would need to be an independent third-party investigation into the matter.
Okay, so is there a motion to that effect by any commissioner?
Yeah, just last quick question.
Could I speak?
Oh, go ahead.
Could I speak one more time?
Go ahead. Is this Mark?
That's Eric.
No, this is Eric Boseman, Back End Construction. I wasn't sure which I think was speaking retainage amount in the worst case scenario. If at this point, I'm going to accept it. If they release all the retention, they are accepting it. Would a partial release be reasonable? Leave 2% or something like that, because we still do have the maintenance bond, out there to protect the county from quote unquote worst case scenario. Like you said, the $540,000 we got in that situation is not going to be handle your worst case scenario. My biggest, I have no concerns about the long-term viability of the product we put down. I just don't really, I guess I go back to where we were before. We're talking about 1,600 linear feet on 22 and a half miles, and you guys have security with the bond. If you want to leave it partially open with a partial retainage, I think that makes everybody happy while we explore our options.
This is Commissioner Oz. I respectfully disagree with that. I believe that if we can perhaps discuss the retainage following the results of testing.
So just one last thought is if, again, I can understand a contractor saying you want me to pay for testing when I think it was, your base, and you've got the other side saying we wonder if it's the product, and at the same time you're sitting on over $500,000 of compensation owed. Is there a scenario where the county can say, hey, look, we realize small business contractor, this, that, and the other, maybe I'm more sympathetic to, is that we can pay for the testing, and then based on the results of those testing, it's either going to release the retainage in whole, or it's not going to release the retainage at all. I mean, it's almost like using the retainage to pay for the testing that's necessary versus an additional expense on a contractor that's asking for why, if 98% of my project was successful or assumed successful, that I've got to spend additional. It's like, I'm having to spend additional money to validate the money that you already owe me. We're saying, well, do we owe you? Because we're concerned with the product that we received. So is there a scenario like that where I don't know what this expense is. That's the other thing. It's like a total variable to me. I don't know if this is a $20,000 cost or a $100,000 cost.
I'd say roughly $50,000, $35,000 to $55,000 would be my estimate. That I know Mark and I had discussed that on the phone when we were talking about whether or not testing could be completed prior to repairs being made, and I think he threw out a number that was a little higher than that, 50 to 75, if I'm not mistaken. Olson thought it would be $35,000, their pavement engineer, if we were to do that. So somewhere I would estimate in the $50,000 range to do. You're going to get some bulk pricing because you're going to do several different locations all at the same time, because you need to have a good representation of the project as a whole.
This is Commissioner Cox. We've already paid the majority of the contract amount, and I don't think it's unreasonable to hold the remainder of the retainage until such time as the testing is completed.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Well, Well, what do the commissioners desire to do? We'll take an alternative motion.
What was the worst case scenario cost to fix it if it's?
Well, I think worst case scenario would be a gut and go. They'd have to go tear everything up and redo it. That's the absolute worst case scenario. That would be more than the original project.
Yeah, that's the problem. And we don't know that until we get it tested.
Correct.
Well, this is Commissioner Cox, that's what I was asking for, is before any return of anything, that we get the testing completed.
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Okay, your motion's back on the table, Commissioner Cause?
Pardon?
He's willing to second it now. You're still making your motion again?
Yeah.
And seconded by Commissioner Culberson. Go ahead, Commissioner Shimke.
So, Commissioner Cause, my question is then, there's still a third-party selection and there's still a cost. We're saying that we're also putting that on the contractor, is what you're proposing?
I would propose that if the testing results determined that the fault is with the county, that the county could go ahead and absorb that, but I think that if even a percentage of the cost is associated with the contractor, that the contractor should pay for the testing.
So I didn't know how to, so just a little bit further discussion. What I was trying to figure out how to propose would be, you've got, there's 540,000 rounded in retainage. Let's say the tests were 40,000, just for easier math. Well, based on the results, if it's a county issue, then and that's all proven, then the retainage would be paid to McEnany in full, the 542. If it was a McEnany issue and other variables, well, that retainage, based on whatever it takes to mitigate or remediate the issues, would be less the 40,000. So instead of 540,000, it would be 500,000, or ultimately however much more it takes to solve the problem. That all makes sense to me. It's a very hard motion to make.
Yeah, and then there's still the issue that it's got to be fixed one way or the other.
Right, exactly. But we don't know what that is.
Big problem or a little problem. And if it's a little
So we have a motion on the floor. Shall we take a vote?
Yeah.
Commissioner Culberson?
Aye.
Commissioner Cause?
Aye.
Mr. Shimke?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye.
Okay, so we've solved that. We're not returning the retainage until we have the answer. Now, who's paying for the test and who's doing the test? Because that motion did not solve that.
Correct.
So,
well, I mean, I think it's a very reasonable consideration that if it's proven that it's a county's issue, that the contractor shouldn't have to pick up the bill on that. But if it is directly due to a failure because of construction, then I don't know. I mean, I don't think that an agreement over the telephone is going to hold up or address that. And I don't think that we can mandate, and Mr. Van Paris has to weigh in here, I don't think we can mandate that somebody else pay for it besides the county, because he could just say no, I'm not paying for it.
This is the exact same issue we had on County Road 1.
Yes.
We gotta wait for the test to determine what to do.
So I would recommend that at this time, that if you want to go forward with this, that you do exactly what Commissioner Shimke was contemplating, and that is, right now the county pays for it. If we identify that the failures are the result of construction issues, that then we pursue those charges against the contractor, and if they're part of the failure is on the county side, then it's just us, and we've identified it, and we can come in and resolve the rest of it.
Great motion, Mark. So moved.
is there a second?
Commissioner Cox, second.
Is there further discussion? All those in favor, Mr. Culberson?
Aye.
Ms. Cause?
Aye.
Mr. Shimke?
Aye.
And I vote aye. All right.
So we'll have Bill get on soliciting a few proposals from qualified third parties, and we'll get that testing done as quickly as we possibly can and bring back any results to the Board of County Commissioners at that time.
And as soon as I have a time frame, we will immediately try to develop a time frame, and we will communicate that with you, Eric and Mark, as fast as possible to try to make sure this process is expedited.
Appreciate that.
All right.
Eric, Mark, thank you.
Thanks. All right. G, Linwood County and the City of Linwood roads.
All right. Okay. Before you, we have I'm trying to get to the right stack here.
You need mine?
No, I've got it. I just got to get them in the right order. So we have entered into the process of trying to contact every surrounding entity, both cities within the county and surrounding counties, to make all memorandum of understandings up to date and perpetual in nature until the time a change is necessary, in order to not have them have horizon lines that need renewal. If nothing has changed, it stays in place. We did send these all out, and we have received formalized notice from the City of Linwood, who I believe it was their city clerk, notified us that they did not have any concerns regarding the interlocal agreement for roadway maintenance. And so the appropriate action would be to accept the agreement for maintenance of roads between Leavenworth County and the City of Linwood.
If I could just give I just want to give a little bit of background here.
Yep.
This is a project that is over 3 years in the making, and I want to commend Bill and his staff that since Bill has come on, we've had several projects like this that were kind of stagnant, and he has been able to check them off the list. And this is one that actually Commissioner Smith brought up probably closer to 3.5 years ago. So I want to thank him for getting on these and getting these taken care of, and appreciate that.
Well done, Bill.
All right. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the MOU?
Yep.
With the City of Linwood and Leavenworth County.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Commissioner Culberson.
Hang on for 1 second.
Oh.
It is.
It's not an MOU. MOUs are.
It's an agreement. You want to see it?
I just want to make sure that it's an
the wording
agreement.
of the motion.
It's just an agreement, yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, the characterization as an MOU, I think it would be better to characterize it as an agreement. Counties and cities can enter into agreements that have the enforceability of contract without going through the process that is used for a memorandum of understanding.
Commissioner Shimke, do you agree to modify your motion to that extent?
Yes.
And Commissioner Culberson, do you also agree to your second?
Yep, I still second.
All right, and we'll vote again. Commissioner Culberson.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Cause.
Aye.
Commissioner Shimke.
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. All right.
All right.
Next.
Next item is for your consideration is approval of the bid for the front-mounted motor grader roadside shouldering machine. It's conveyor driven. It runs off of the hydraulic system of the road grader, and it would be utilized to maintain the shoulders of paved roadways, and also has some applications on gravel roadways for double ditching. You have a ditch or washout at the edge of the gravel surface with your actual ditch line out in the grassed area. We did, prior to putting it up for sealed bid, we did get go out and procure pricing or get pricing on several different types of these shouldering machines. The one that met our needs was the least expensive. We did write specifications for that type of machine and send those specifications out to all of the types of suppliers who have those. Only one bid was received. It was received in the same manner that was the non-sealed pricing for it, and it is $31,914. From my understanding, this was an item that had been allocated within previous budgets, but specifications were never completed, and procurement was never done. So it's an item that was previously approved, is not part of this year's budget, but it is something that we can use on many different applications.
Yeah, Bill's right. The previous commission had already approved a $40,000 allotment for a shoulder machine, but I'm confused. Is this to create new shoulders if there is no shoulder, or does it to maintain existing shoulder?
If there is room, you can do both. It's a conveyor belt driven system, so you'd back a dump truck. It would hook to where your scare fire is on the front of a road grader, and hook to your hydraulic system, and so you can run that machine down the road and then grade behind it because it's coming out on the front of the grader through this conveyor belt. And so you can...
And you dump AB3 in it with grass seed, right?
I don't know that we add grass seed to it, but we do dump AB3. I've never put grass seed in it, but you could put grass seed in it. But the...
they did.
You could.
They do up in Easton.
I don't know. You could. I mean, it would probably hold better.
Grass seed.
But
there you go.
But yeah, you could do it on a roadway that had a shoulder or didn't have a shoulder. There wouldn't be a real, if you don't have edge drop off on your pavement, then you wouldn't need to do it on a. It's for areas that have edge drop off.
Yeah, because the edge of the asphalt drops straight down 6 inches,
Yep.
or
you've got
even 2 foot.
Yeah, well, 2 foot you might need to. We might need to do
some different work there.
Different work there, but
Okay.
say Millwood Road, if the edge of the roadway got washed out because somebody dropped, we get through curve sections, people seem to hug the inside of the curve, and their wheel may go off the inside of the road, and you'll have that rut that is muddy on the inside of an asphalt roadway curve area, and you could go through there and fill that back in, or you could go through some sections of roadway and where it just is settled after a project and add that material back in.
That's like what we were getting before.
So, Bill, my only question would be, and I know I've heard Doug talk about this piece of equipment many times, so he's going to be super excited. We did the analysis, I'm assuming, on kind of the rent, lease versus buy scenario, how often we can use it. The same things come up on like street sweepers, for example, where we're going in and dealing with cul-de-sacs and all that kind of stuff. So
I think these are rare enough.
you couldn't lease or rent one if you wanted to.
Couldn't lease or rent one.
Okay.
We did price buying used ones, and the cost was not significantly less. If they were for a good used one, you were going to save a few $1,000s and have no warranty.
Okay.
And so, and the more expensive ones that were not as applicable for what we wanted, they didn't front mount, and they just weren't what we would use on a gravel road ever if you were going to apply this to a gravel road use. They were like $60,000. So of the options available, this is the most economical.
Got it.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the bid pricing for one front-mounted motor grader roadside shouldering conveyor for the Public Works Road and Bridge Department not to exceed $31,914.
And is there a second?
Second.
What was that?
I make a second.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion?
It was seconded by Commissioner Culbertson.
Yes.
And like I said, we had already approved like $40,000 for this a couple years ago, so it went down a little bit.
You just saved $9,000. Well done, Jeff.
Commissioner Cos, did you have any comments?
No, I don't.
Commissioner Shemke? All right. Voting, Commissioner Culberson.
Aye.
Commissioner Cos.
Aye.
Commissioner Shemke.
Right.
And I'll vote yes. All right. And last but not least.
All right, last one here today.
Bill's utilization's been awful today.
Yeah. So, the last thing for your consideration today is the acceptance of the 2020 KDOT or Kansas Cost Share Program Award that the county received for 158th Street. It is for a roadway improvement project that was designed in 2004 initially and had not had funding allocated towards it. The cost of the project is approximately $2.5 million. This round of cost share funding, every round of cost share funding that has been made available by the state, the maximum award amount has been decreased. $900,000 is the maximum award amount. And if you look at the amount of money that KDOT or the state of Kansas had towards the Kansas Cost Share Program, they funded 18 projects and did not nearly have the money to fund them all anywhere near this level. And so we did really well in this application process. I think they only had about $6 million, which I'd have to research to make sure it's 100% accurate at this point. But I think it was $6 million to hand out statewide, and we did receive $900,000 of it, the maximum amount. By doing this by accepting this project, it is a 2022 construction period, and that is fiscal year. Previously, when this project had been discussed, it was believed that the right-of-way still needed to be acquired. I know Commissioner Smith said he thought that maybe it was possible that we had acquired some of that right-of-way. I think through research that we've completed in the last couple weeks, I think the majority of that right-of-way has been acquired that we need for this project. And so it is a fiscal year project, so it could be anywhere between October of 2021 and September of 2022. Realistically, because we have to update the plans, it would be a 2022 calendar year project. It is 2 miles from K32 north through Metro Avenue to Kansas Avenue across I-70. There is a quarter-mile stretch in that roadway that has had 18 injury accidents and 2 fatalities in the last 30 months. And so it would address a significant need. Obviously, this is a capital improvement project, so we would need to fund the remaining $1.5 million from our sales tax fund in order to facilitate its construction. With that, I would turn it over to the board for any questions or comments.
Okay, are there questions, comments?
I think it's just another opportunity to recognize Bill. A lot of hard work, and it's pretty exciting to be able to receive 15% of the state allocated funds, if that's what it ended up being for a project like this. That's pretty big.
Commissioner Cause?
I have no question.
Commissioner Culberson?
I just want to make sure we remember this when I talk about paving roads in the north in the near future.
I'm sure we will listen to all of that. Okay, being that what the hour is, we'll take a motion.
Well, I'm not going to make it.
I'll make a motion to accept the Fall 2020 Cost Share Program Award for 158th Street Roadway Safety Improvement Project for 2022.
And I'll second that. Is there discussion? Commissioner Culberson?
Aye.
Commissioner Cause?
Aye.
Mr. Shempy?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. I will say just a little comment on that. That is one of the most dangerous roads in the county, and it's going to really.
We don't have any dangerous roads.
It's one of the roads that we can improve. Put it that way.
There has been a frequency of accidents on that road, but it is not inherently dangerous.
And that would be the legal way of saying it.
That's the official party line.
Very good. But let me tell you, the people down there really are going to appreciate it. And Bill, thank you for following through on that. And yes, we have a lot of places in the county we need to work on, but this is a really big deal. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is John Rossmeyer still in the room?
John Richmeyer is here in the room.
Did you need him to say something?
Yeah, before we adjourn, I wanted to mention, Bill, did they decide if they're going to open Millwood Bridge up Friday or Monday?
We're still pushing for Friday.
Millwood Bridge is opening up.
We're still pushing for Friday. Striping was scheduled.
Canal.
Striping scheduled for today. Final seating was supposed to be tomorrow. So I'm hoping that as soon as they throw that, because they'll want to work from the road to get their seat on the edges of, down around the bridge. So my hope is as soon as they're pulling off there, I'll send you a text. You can get outside your house for a minute and go pull all the road closed signs down.
Is there a picture of the plaque? Does it say Culbertson Bridge?
There is a plaque on the bridge. There's a plaque on the bridge, and we do have a bronze plaque on the bridge, and it says all 5 commissioners, the design firm, the contractor, the bridge name, and the year of construction. So anybody who wants to take a...
I think we need Commissioner Culberson's picture.
Yeah, go take a selfie with that.
I'll drive out there and take a picture of Jeff with it.
Well, you email that to me, Commissioner Cause, and I will have Stephanie Sloop put it on Facebook.
Just hold your hand over your other names, Jeff, when you take that.
Hey, don't stand next to Jeff. Don't do that.
So, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Let's make sure John got that in the paper.
All those in favor? We're adjourned.